A millionaire decides that his daughter will choose who will be her new mother among 5 high society women, but the child ignores the shine of jewels and clings to the only one who always offered her true affection. The candidates, consumed by envy, begin a cruel attack against the poor housekeeper of the mansion. What no one expected was that the girl's innocent choice would reveal who really deserved the family's love. The autumn air carried a crisp chill through Greenwich, Connecticut, as Robert Mitchell stared out the window of his study. The sprawling estate grounds stretched before him, leaves painted in amber and crimson, but the beauty was lost on him. His gaze drifted to a photograph on his desk. Himself, his late wife Catherine, and their son Ethan, all smiles during their last vacation. In Hawaii, 18 months had passed since Catherine's illness took her away, yet the mansion still echoed with her absence. Robert ran his hand through his salt and pepper hair and turned when he heard a soft knock on the door. "Come in," he called, straightening his posture. Margaret, his personal assistant for over a decade, entered with a tablet in hand. "Mr. Mitchell, I've finalized the list of candidates as you requested. 5 women, all with impressive backgrounds." Her expression remained professionally neutral, though Robert caught a flicker of concern in her eyes. "Are you absolutely certain about this approach?" Robert nodded firmly. "Margaret, I've tried everything else, the best child psychologist, therapy, even that wellness retreat in Colorado. Nothing's working." His voice lowered. "Ethan barely speaks anymore. He doesn't play with other children. His teachers say he just sits alone during recess." Robert's chest tightened at the thought of his once vibrant son now withdrawn into a shell of silence. "But a competition to find a new wife. It's rather unconventional," Margaret ventured cautiously. "Unconventional problems require unconventional solutions," Robert replied, walking to the bar to pour himself a small scotch. "Catherine was everything to Ethan. Since losing her, it's like he's lost his anchor to the world." He took a sip, feeling the liquid warm his throat. "He needs a mother figure, and He hesitated. "I need help. I can run a billion-dollar company, but I can't reach my own son." Margaret nodded, knowing how fiercely Robert had tried to connect with Ethan since Catherine's passing. "The candidates will arrive next Monday. They'll stay for 30 days. As discussed, each has agreed to the terms and signed the confidentiality agreements, and they understand the final decision rests with Ethan?" "Yes, though I'm not sure they all take that part seriously. They likely think they need to impress." "You first," Margaret scrolled through her tablet. "Victoria Hawthorne, socialite with a degree in international relations. Melanie Roberts, model and social media influencer. Alexandra Morgan, attorney with Goldstein and Burke. Dr. Jennifer Calloway, dermatologist with her own medical spa chain. And Samantha Peters, architect specializing in luxury properties." Robert nodded absently. All suitable matches on paper, educated, accomplished women who moved in the same social circles as himself. Women who would understand the demands of his position and the lifestyle that came with it. "Have the West Wing prepared for them, 5 separate suites." He turned back to the window. "And Margaret, make sure Ethan's schedule is adjusted accordingly. I want him to have ample time to interact with each of them." "Of course," Margaret hesitated before adding, "what about Abigail? Will she continue her regular duties during this arrangement?" Robert's brow furrowed slightly. "The housekeeper? Why wouldn't she? The mansion still needs to be maintained, perhaps more so with 5 additional guests." Margaret chose her words carefully. "It's just that Ethan seems quite attached to her. I've noticed they spend time together when she's working near his rooms." "Does he?" Robert looked genuinely surprised. He'd been so consumed with work and grief that he'd failed to notice this development. "What do they do?" "She helps him with homework sometimes. I've seen them folding paper creatures, origami, I believe. Last week they were baking in the kitchen." Margaret's expression softened. "It's the only time I've seen him smile in months." Robert set down his glass, this revelation striking him unexpectedly. "I had no idea." He made a mental note to observe this interaction himself. Nevertheless, the plan proceeds. Abigail will continue her duties as normal. After Margaret left, Robert found himself walking through the quiet hallways of the mansion, eventually stopping outside Ethan's room. The door was slightly ajar, and he could hear a soft, gentle voice reading aloud. Not his son's, but a female voice he didn't immediately recognize. Peering in, he saw Ethan sitting cross-legged on his bedroom floor, completely engrossed in whatever story was being read to him. Across from him sat a young woman with chestnut hair pulled back in, a simple ponytail, animatedly reading from a book about dinosaurs, giving each prehistoric creature a different voice. Ethan wasn't speaking, but his eyes were wide with interest, a stark contrast to the vacant stare Robert had grown accustomed. Now this must be Abigail, Robert realized. The housekeeper Margaret had mentioned. Robert had hired her through his staff 4 months ago, but had barely interacted with her himself. Looking at her now, he noticed nothing particularly remarkable about her appearance. Simple clothes, minimal makeup, no expensive jewelry. Yet there was something undeniably warm about her presence. Not wanting to interrupt the rare moment of engagement from his son, Robert quietly stepped back. He'd speak with Abigail another time. For now, he had arrangements to finalize. The following Monday arrived with a flurry of activity. Robert stood in the grand foyer, watching as a procession of luxury vehicles delivered his 5 candidates to the mansion. Each arrival was a production in itself. Victoria Hawthorne emerged from a chauffeur-driven Bentley, her blonde hair styled in elegant waves, diamonds glittering at her ears and throat. She extended a manicured hand to Robert. "Mr. Mitchell, what a pleasure to finally meet you. Your reputation precedes you." "As does yours, Miss Hawthorne. Welcome to my home." Robert gestured to the staff waiting to collect her luggage, 4 designer suitcases and a garment bag. Melanie Roberts arrived next, her entrance carefully captured by her personal assistant, who seemed to be documenting the moment for social media. Her smile was dazzling, practiced to perfection. "Robert, this place is absolutely Instagram-worthy." She air-kissed both his cheeks. "I can't wait to bring my special touch to these gorgeous spaces." Alexandra Morgan's approach was more reserved but equally confident. Her handshake was firm, her gaze direct. "Mr. Mitchell, thank you for this opportunity. I've followed your business achievements for years. Your strategic acquisition of TechVantage Solutions last quarter was particularly impressive." Dr. Jennifer. Calloway arrived in a sleek Tesla, her medical credentials subtly referenced in her conversation within minutes of her arrival. "Your home has remarkable natural light, so important for maintaining proper circadian rhythms, especially for a child Ethan's age. I've developed a special supplement regimen for my younger patients that shows remarkable results." Samantha Peters was the last to arrive, her architect's eye immediately assessing the mansion's structure. "The Georgian symmetry of the facade is stunning, though I notice the east wing has some Victorian influences. An interesting juxtaposition. I'd love to hear the story behind that design choice." Each woman had brought gifts for Ethan, expensive, carefully selected items that Robert suspected were meant to impress him as much as his son. Victoria presented a junior golf set from the same exclusive brand Robert used. Melanie brought the latest gaming console that wasn't even available to the public yet. Alexandra offered a child-sized tailored suit that matched Robert's preferred style. Jennifer brought educational science kits with a focus on health. Samantha had commissioned a custom architectural model of their mansion with miniature furniture that could be rearranged. The women were being shown to their rooms when Ethan finally appeared, lurking shyly at the top of the grand staircase. Robert beckoned to him. "Ethan, come down and meet our guests." The boy descended slowly, each step reluctant. At 8 years old, he was small for his age, with Catherine's deep blue eyes and Robert's dark hair. He stood beside his father, not making eye contact with any of the women who immediately shifted their attention to him, their smiles widening. "Hello, Ethan." Victoria knelt to his level, her voice taking on a honeyed tone she hadn't used with Robert. "I'm so happy to meet you. Your daddy has told us wonderful things about you." Ethan nodded mutely, his eyes fixed on the marble floor. "I brought you something special," Melanie chimed in, motioning to her assistant who presented the gaming console. "It's the coolest new system. All the celebrity kids are crazy about it." "Thank you," Ethan whispered, the words barely audible. Each woman took turns introducing herself. their approaches varying from Jennifer's clinical assessment of his posture to Alexandra's almost courtroom-like questioning about his interests. Samantha encouraged him to play with the miniature mansion model. Throughout these interactions, Ethan remained withdrawn, offering only minimal responses. The awkward scene was interrupted when Abigail appeared from a side hallway, carrying a stack of fresh towels. She froze momentarily when she saw the gathering, clearly not expecting the foyer to be occupied. "Oh, I'm sorry," she apologized, moving to skirt around the group. "Abby," Ethan's voice suddenly rang out, startling everyone. The boy broke away from his father's side and rushed toward the housekeeper, his face transformed by a genuine smile. "Did you bring the cinnamon for the cookies we're making?" Abigail's expression softened as she looked down at Ethan. "I sure did. It's in the kitchen, ready when you are." She glanced up apologetically at Robert and the assembled women. "I'm sorry, Mr. Mitchell. I didn't realize you were all here." Robert was too stunned by his son's sudden animation to respond immediately. It was Victoria who broke the silence, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Well, isn't this sweet? You must be part of the household staff." "Yes, ma'am. Abigail Cooper. I help maintain the East Wing." She shifted the towels in her arms, clearly uncomfortable under the scrutiny of 5 immaculately dressed women. "Abby teaches me origami," Ethan volunteered, the most words Robert had heard from him in a single sentence in months. "We're making 1,000 paper cranes. It's a Japanese wish tradition." The 5 candidates exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. "That sounds charming," Alexandra commented, her tone suggesting it was anything but. "However, I'm sure Abigail has many duties to attend to, and we have so many exciting activities planned for you, Ethan." "Indeed," Jennifer added. "Perhaps your little paper crafts can wait. I've brought some fascinating brain puzzles that are much more educational." Abigail nodded politely. "Of course, Ethan, we can continue another time." She gave him a gentle smile. "Enjoy meeting your father's guests." As Abigail excused herself, Robert noticed his son's shoulders slump, the brief moment of animation fading. The women quickly resumed their attention on Ethan, each trying different approaches to engage him, but the spark had disappeared. He was once again the silent, withdrawn child Robert had grown accustomed to. Later that evening, after the candidates had retired to their rooms and Ethan was in bed, Robert found himself wandering to the kitchen for a late-night snack. To his surprise, he found Abigail there, cleaning up what appeared to be the aftermath of a baking session. "Mr. Mitchell," she straightened immediately. "I'm sorry for the mess. Ethan and I made cookies earlier. I was just finishing up." "No need to apologize." Robert leaned against the counter, studying her. In the quiet kitchen light, he could see she was younger than he'd initially thought, probably in her mid-20s. "Margaret tells me you spend time with my son." Abigail nodded, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "Yes, sir. It started when I was dusting his bookshelves. He was having trouble with some math homework and I offered to help. After that, he started seeking me out." A faint smile touched her lips. "He's a wonderful boy. Very bright." "He spoke to you," Robert said, still processing this fact. "He actually smiled when he saw you." Abigail's expression turned sympathetic. Grief affects everyone differently, especially children. Sometimes it's easier to talk to someone who isn't directly connected to the loss. She immediately looked contrite. "I'm sorry, it's not my place." "No," Robert interrupted. "Please, I want to understand. What do you two talk about?" Abigail hesitated. "Stars, mostly. He loves astronomy. We fold paper stars and hang them from his ceiling. Sometimes dinosaurs. He knows an impressive amount about the Jurassic period." She smiled again. "And sometimes we don't talk at all. We just bake or fold paper together in comfortable silence." Robert felt a complex mixture of emotions, gratitude that someone had reached his son, and a twinge of something like jealousy that it hadn't been him. "Thank you," he said finally, "for being kind to him." "It's no hardship, Mr. Mitchell. Ethan is easy to care for." She finished wiping down the counter. "If you'll excuse me, I should finish my evening duties." As Abigail left the kitchen, Robert remained thoughtfully eyeing a plate of cinnamon cookies left on the counter. He picked one up and took a bite, finding it surprisingly delicious in its simplicity. Outside the window, the moon cast silver light across his expansive gardens, illuminating the carefully manicured landscape that surrounded his lonely mansion. 5 accomplished, beautiful women were now under his roof, each hoping to become the next Mrs. Mitchell. It was an arrangement that made perfect sense on paper, yet the image that lingered in his mind was the brief, genuine smile that had transformed his son's face when he'd spotted the unassuming housekeeper with her stack of towels. Robert finished the cookie, brushed the crumbs from his hands, and turned off the kitchen light. The competition had officially begun, but he couldn't shake the feeling that there were currents moving beneath the surface that he hadn't anticipated. As he climbed the grand staircase toward his empty bedroom, he wondered what the coming days would bring, and whether any of his carefully selected candidates could ever bring that same smile to Ethan's face. The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of the conservatory as Robert hosted the first official breakfast with his 5 guests. The table was immaculately set with fine china and crystal, fresh flowers arranged in the center. Each woman had dressed impressively for what most people would consider a casual family breakfast. "I hope everyone slept well," Robert said, signaling the staff to begin serving. "Today marks the official start of our arrangement." "The accommodations are exquisite," Victoria commented, accepting a cup of coffee from a uniformed server. "Though I did notice the thread count on the sheets is only 800. I typically use 1200 at my Manhattan apartment." Melanie was busy arranging her breakfast plate for what appeared to be a photo. "Do you mind if I share this stunning spread on my Instagram? My followers would die to see inside the Mitchell estate." "I'm afraid that won't be possible," Robert replied firmly. "As outlined in the agreement you signed, this entire arrangement is private. No social media, no press, no outside communication regarding what occurs within these walls." Melanie's smile faltered slightly. "Of course, I completely understand. Privacy is sacred." She set her phone down with visible reluctance. Alexandra, already reviewing documents on her tablet between bites of her grapefruit, glanced up. "I've taken the liberty of researching Ethan's school curriculum. I've prepared a supplementary, educational program that should help advance his academic standing. Children of his social position should be at least 2 grade levels above average." "That's thoughtful," Robert responded diplomatically, "though I'm more concerned with his emotional well-being at the moment than his academic advancement." "Physical health and emotional health are intrinsically connected," Jennifer interjected. "I've brought a selection of pediatric wellness supplements, all natural, of course, designed to support cognitive function and emotional regulation." Samantha, who had been quietly observing, finally spoke. "Perhaps what Ethan needs most is simply a comfortable space. I noticed his room, while beautiful, feels somewhat impersonal. With your permission, Robert, I'd like to redesign it to be more conducive to creativity and expression." Robert nodded thoughtfully. "You're all welcome to find your own approaches to connecting with Ethan. That's the purpose of this arrangement. After all, speaking of which," he checked his watch, "he should be joining us momentarily." As if on cue, Ethan appeared at the doorway, hesitant and small in his school uniform. His eyes widened slightly at the sight of the 5 women all turning to look at him simultaneously. "Good morning, Ethan," Robert called warmly. "Come sit with us for breakfast before school." The boy approached slowly, taking the empty seat beside his father, furthest from the women. A server immediately brought him a plate with pancakes shaped like dinosaurs, clearly prepared specially for him. "Those pancakes are adorable," Jennifer commented, though perhaps a bit high in refined carbohydrates for a growing boy. Ethan stared down at his plate without responding. "I used to love dinosaurs when I was your age," Samantha offered. "Do you have a favorite?" Ethan shrugged without looking up. "I know the son of the Belgian ambassador," Victoria said. "He's about your age. Perhaps we could arrange a play date. His family has the most marvelous private zoo at their estate." Still no response from Ethan. Melanie pulled out a small gift bag. "I have something for you, sweetie. It's a limited edition watch, just like the one your daddy wears, but sized for you." Ethan glanced briefly at the expensive watch, then set it aside with a quiet, "Thank you." The awkward silence that followed was broken when Abigail entered from a side door with a fresh pitcher of orange juice. Immediately, Ethan's posture changed, his head lifting. "Good morning, everyone," Abigail said politely, moving to refill. "Glasses." "Abby, look!" Ethan suddenly spoke, pointing to his plate. "Dinosaur pancakes." "Those look amazing," she replied with genuine enthusiasm. "Is that a Triceratops, your favorite?" Ethan nodded eagerly. Chef Mike remembered. The 5 women exchanged glances again, this time with more obvious displeasure at the interruption. "How nice that the help knows about dinosaurs," Alexandra commented dryly. "Actually," Abigail responded with a gentle smile, "I studied paleontology for 2 years before I had to leave college." She placed the pitcher on the table and turned to go. "Abby," Ethan called after her, "don't forget we have to check on our experiment after school." "Wouldn't miss it," she assured him before disappearing back through the side door. Victoria turned to Robert with an arched eyebrow. "An experiment." Robert, equally puzzled, looked to his son. "What experiment is that, Ethan?" For a moment it seemed Ethan might retreat back into his shell, but instead he answered, "We're growing crystals. Abby showed me how to make them. With borax and pipe cleaners. They look like diamonds when they're done." "How charming," Victoria's voice dripped with condescension, though perhaps a bit pedestrian. "I could take you to see real diamonds," Melanie offered quickly. "I did a photo shoot at Tiffany's last month. The director is a personal friend." "Or," Jennifer cut in, "we could do a much more educational experiment. I have a portable DNA extraction kit that shows children real molecular biology." Ethan had already returned his attention to his pancakes, the brief moment of animation fading. After breakfast, Robert walked Ethan to the waiting car that would take him to school. Away from the women, he knelt to his son's level. "Ethan, I know this situation is unusual, but these ladies are here because I want you to have a complete family again, a mother figure in your life." Ethan looked at his father, his eyes suddenly older than his years. "I had a mom. She's gone." Robert felt the familiar ache in his chest. "I know, buddy, I miss her too every day." "Abby doesn't try to be mom," Ethan said quietly. "She's just Abby." Before Robert could respond to this insight, Ethan had climbed into the car. Robert watched it drive away, his son's words echoing in his mind. Later that morning, Robert observed, from his home office, as each woman implemented her strategy for winning Ethan's affection. Victoria had arranged for a private showing of the newest animated film in the mansion's theater room for when Ethan returned from school, complete with gourmet popcorn and movie theater candy. Melanie was setting up an elaborate photo shoot, area with costumes and props, clearly planning to make Ethan the star. Alexandra had created a miniature courtroom scenario where Ethan could play judge. Jennifer had organized a wellness spa experience supposedly designed for children. Samantha was in the garden sketching plans for an elaborate treehouse. Margaret entered with Robert's afternoon coffee. "They're certainly making an effort," she commented, following his gaze to the garden where Samantha was now measuring trees. "They are," Robert agreed, "though I'm not sure any of them understand what Ethan actually needs." Margaret hesitated before asking, "And what do you think that is?" Robert sighed, leaning back in his chair. "That's the problem. I don't know either." He turned to his assistant. "What do you know about Abigail Cooper? Her background, her history?" "Not much beyond her employment record," Margaret admitted. "She came highly recommended from her previous employer in Boston. Impeccable references. She mentioned having to leave college due to financial hardship after her parents passed away. She's been living with an elderly aunt in town since moving here." "She's an orphan?" Robert asked, surprised. "Since she was 20, I believe. Car accident took both parents." Robert nodded thoughtfully. "Perhaps that's why she connects with Ethan. She understands loss." When Ethan returned from school that afternoon, the 5 women were waiting with their activities prepared. To everyone's surprise, Ethan politely declined each offer. "No thank you, Ms. Victoria. I don't really like movies right now." "I don't want to dress up, Ms. Melanie." "I don't understand the law game, Ms. Alexandra." "Those herbs smell too strong, Dr. Jennifer." The trees are too small for a treehouse, Miss Samantha. Instead, he disappeared to the east wing of the mansion. Robert, curious, followed discreetly. He found Ethan in a small study room, sitting at a table with Abigail, carefully examining a jar filled with blue crystals growing on pipe cleaner structures. "They're getting bigger," Ethan observed, his voice animated. "How long until they're done?" "Another day should do it," Abigail replied. "The science behind it is fascinating. The borax dissolves in the hot water. Then, as the water cools and evaporates, the borax molecules can't stay dissolved anymore, so they stick to the pipe cleaners and form crystals." "Like magic, but it's science," Ethan said with a small smile. "Exactly, the best kind of magic." She set out sheets of colored paper on the table. "Now how about we work on those origami stars while we wait? We still need about 200 more for your constellation." Robert watched, unnoticed, as Abigail patiently showed Ethan how to fold the paper into perfect five-pointed stars. There was something captivating about the easy rapport between them. No forced enthusiasm, no desperate attempts to impress, just genuine connection. Most striking was Ethan himself, transformed from the silent, withdrawn child at breakfast to an engaged, curious boy. That evening, Robert hosted a formal dinner for the candidates. Ethan had been excused to eat earlier with his usual caretaker, as the conversation was planned to focus on adult matters, specifically getting to know each woman better. "Tell me, Victoria," Robert began as the first course was served, "what made you decide to participate in this arrangement?" Victoria delicately patted her lips with a napkin. "Well, Robert, I've always admired your business acumen. Mitchell Enterprises is a force in the industry. Beyond that, I've reached a point in my life where I'm ready for family life. My background in international relations has prepared me to be an excellent hostess and partner for a man of your stature. And children respond well to structure and refinement, which I can certainly provide. And you, Melanie?" The influencer beamed. "I believe in modern family dynamics. My platform is all about authentic living and creating beautiful moments. I could help Ethan develop his personal brand from a young age, so important in today's digital world. Plus, we'd make a stunning family portrait." She laughed lightly. "But seriously, I have a genuine desire to nurture a child, especially one who has experienced loss." Alexandra's response was predictably strategic. "I've always been goal-oriented. Marriage and family are natural milestones I've been working toward after establishing my career. My skills in negotiation and conflict resolution would be invaluable in family dynamics. Additionally, I've researched childhood grief extensively, in preparation for meeting Ethan." Jennifer spoke about holistic family wellness and her desire to create a balanced home environment. "Children need consistent health routines. My medical background would ensure Ethan receives optimal care during these formative years. And of course, I find you intellectually stimulating, Robert." Samantha focused on creating spaces that nurture family connections. A home should reflect and support the people within it. I could create environments that would help Ethan process his grief and discover new joy. As for us, Robert, I believe we share a vision for thoughtful, intentional living. Each answer was polished, rehearsed, and focused primarily on what they could bring to Robert's life, with Ethan mentioned almost as an afterthought. None spoke of genuine affection for a child they'd barely met. As dessert was being served, the conversation was interrupted when a server accidentally spilled water on Victoria's designer dress. "You imbecile!" she snapped, jumping up. "This is a Versace. Do you have any idea how much this costs?" The young server turned pale. "I'm so sorry, Mum. Please let me—" "Don't touch me," Victoria hissed. "You've done enough damage. Robert, I expect this person to be disciplined immediately." Robert, taken aback by the sudden venom in Victoria's voice, responded calmly. "Accidents happen. I'm sure it wasn't intentional." "It's completely unacceptable," Victoria insisted, dabbing furiously at her dress. "This level of incompetence reflects poorly on your household management." The other women watched with varying reactions. Melanie looked uncomfortable but said nothing. Alexandra seemed to be analyzing Victoria's behavior with clinical detachment. Jennifer offered him practical advice about treating the fabric, and Samantha quietly helped the mortified server clean up the spilled water. Later that night, after the women had retired to their rooms, Robert found himself once again wandering the halls of his mansion. He passed by the library and was surprised to hear voices inside. Pausing at the partially open door, he saw Abigail sitting in an armchair with Ethan in his pajamas, reading a book together. "But why didn't the boy in the story just tell the truth?" Ethan was asking. "Sometimes people are afraid of consequences," Abigail explained gently. "Or they think a lie will make things easier. But usually the truth is best in the long run, even when it's hard. Mom always said lying makes your soul smaller." "That sounds like wise advice," Abigail replied. "Your mom must have been very smart." "She was," Ethan said softly. "Do you think she'd be mad that Dad is trying to find a new mom for me?" Robert held his breath, waiting for Abigail's response. "I think," she said carefully, "that your mom would want both you and your dad to be happy. She loved you very much, and people who love us want us to find joy, even when they can't be with us anymore." "None of those ladies make me feel happy," Ethan confessed. "They're trying too hard. It feels fake." "They're just getting to know you," Abigail offered diplomatically. "Sometimes adults don't know how to talk to children. They forget that you're a person with your own thoughts and feelings." "You don't forget that," Ethan pointed out. Abigail smiled. "I try not to. Now, it's getting late, and you have school. Tomorrow. One more chapter or time for bed?" "One more chapter," Ethan decided, settling closer to her. Robert quietly stepped away from the door, his mind troubled. The contrast between the stilted interactions at dinner and the natural warmth of the scene in the library couldn't be more stark. But what was he to do? The arrangement was already in motion, contract signed, expectations set. As he made his way back to his own suite, he passed Victoria's room and overheard voices inside. Curious, he paused. "The maid has to go," Victoria was saying sharply. "Did you see how the boy gravitates to her? It's unseemly." "Completely inappropriate," agreed another voice. Alexandra's, Robert realized. A household employee shouldn't be so familiar with the child of the house. "The question is, how to handle it," a third voice, Melanie, chimed in. "We can't just demand Robert fire her without reason. We create a reason," Jennifer suggested, her voice calculating. "Make her position untenable. Or simply ensure she's too busy with actual work to play nanny," Samantha added. "If we all need a little extra attention to our rooms, special. Requests additional cleaning?" "I like how you think," Victoria approved. "Starting tomorrow, we make sure Little Miss Perfect Maid has no time for story time and science experiments." Robert stepped back, disturbed by what he'd overheard. The women he'd invited into his home, supposedly to help his son heal, were plotting against the one person who seemed to actually understand Ethan. The revelation cast their earlier polished responses in a new, troubling light. He retreated to his room, his thoughts in turmoil. Outside, the wind had picked up, rustling through the autumn leaves. The sound reminded him of Catherine. She had loved fall, the colors, the crisp air, the transformation of their grounds into a canvas of reds and golds. "What would you do, Kath?" he whispered to the empty room. "What have I set in motion here?" No answer came, of course, but as he stood at his window, watching the moonlight play across the gardens, Robert made a decision. He would observe more carefully in the coming days, not just Ethan's interactions with the candidates, but the candidates themselves, their true natures, not the carefully curated versions they presented to him. The competition had taken an unexpected turn, and Robert needed to understand what was really happening beneath the surface of his perfect, empty mansion. By the end of the first week, a pattern had emerged in the Mitchell mansion. Each morning, the 5 candidates would present increasingly elaborate plans to engage Ethan. Each afternoon, Ethan would politely decline their offers and disappear to find Abigail. Each evening, Robert would observe the growing frustration among the women and the whispered conversations that abruptly halted when he entered a room. On this particular morning, Robert was reviewing contracts in his office when Margaret entered, with a concerned expression. "Mr. Mitchell, there seems to be a situation developing with the household staff." Robert set down his pen. "What kind of situation?" There have been complaints about Abigail. The other housekeepers report she's not completing her assigned duties. Rooms left uncleaned, linens not changed. That doesn't sound like the reports you've given me previously, Robert noted, his suspicion immediately aroused. What's changed? Margaret hesitated. The workload has increased significantly. All 5 guests have been making special requests. Victoria wants her sheets changed twice daily, and specific mineral water brought up hourly. Melanie has been accidentally spilling makeup and requesting immediate cleanup. Alexandra keeps demanding her room be reorganized according to various feng shui principles. Jennifer has been mixing aromatherapy oils that stain the furniture and require intensive cleaning. And Samantha has been rearranging furniture constantly, requiring heavy lifting and assistance. All directed at Abigail specifically? Yes, the head housekeeper tried to redistribute some tasks, but the ladies have been insistent that only Abigail will do. Robert leaned back, recalling the conversation he'd overheard. I see. And how is Abigail handling this? Admirably, Margaret admitted. She hasn't complained once, but she's clearly exhausted. I found her taking her lunch break in the laundry room yesterday because it was the only place she could sit down undisturbed. She was asleep, sitting up. Robert frowned. Make sure her duties are fairly distributed, regardless of our guests' preferences. If they protest, direct them to me. After Margaret left, Robert decided to tour the mansion, ostensibly checking on his guests, but actually hoping to observe their behavior when they didn't know he was watching. He found Victoria in the conservatory, on a video call despite the confidentiality agreement. The decor is dreadfully outdated, she was saying to someone on her screen. Of course I'll be redecorating once the arrangement is formalized. The boy is rather dull, but nothing a proper school in Switzerland couldn't fix. Robert moved on without interrupting, making a mental note of the indiscretion. In the media room, Melanie was directing a staff member to take photos of her casually reading a children's book. Make sure you get my good side, she instructed, and we'll crop these later to post after the confidentiality period ends. I need to start building my stepmom influencer brand early. In the library, Alexandra was on her laptop, apparently researching him. Robert caught glimpses of Mitchell Enterprises' financial reports and news articles about his business dealings. He wondered if she was looking for leverage or simply sizing up her potential prize. Jennifer was in the kitchen, berating the chef. These organic vegetables aren't truly organic. I can tell from the uniformity of the color. My wellness brand can't be associated with substandard ingredients. Replace them immediately. Samantha was the only one engaged in something that seemed genuinely intended for Ethan, designing a child's bedroom on her tablet. Yet as Robert looked closer, he noticed the design was featured in an architectural magazine open beside her. Not her original work at all. Robert was troubled by what he'd seen but decided to reserve judgment. Perhaps the pressure of the competition was bringing out unusual behavior. He would continue to observe. That afternoon, he deliberately positioned himself where he could watch the East Wing corridor, waiting for Ethan's return from school. When his son arrived, Robert watched him head straight for what he now knew was Abigail's usual working area at that hour. However, today was different. As Ethan approached the small study where they normally met, Mrs. Winters, the head housekeeper, intercepted him. I'm sorry, Master Ethan, but Abigail is occupied with urgent duties. Miss Victoria's suite had an unfortunate water leak that requires immediate attention. Ethan's face fell. But we were supposed to check our crystal experiment today. They should be done growing. Perhaps another time, Mrs. Winters said kindly. Would you like me to show you to the theater room? I believe Miss Victoria has arranged a private magic show for you. No, thank you, Ethan replied, his shoulders slumping as he turned away. Robert was about to approach his son when he noticed Victoria watching from around a corner, a satisfied smile on her face. As she turned to go, Robert saw her check off something on a small notebook. With growing suspicion, he decided to find Abigail himself. He located her in Victoria's suite, on her hands and knees, scrubbing at the luxurious carpet. There was indeed a large water stain, though Robert noted the suspicious positioning directly in front of the bathroom door. as if someone had deliberately emptied a bathtub onto the floor. "Abigail," he said, startling her. She jumped to her feet. "Mr. Mitchell, I'm sorry about the mess. I'll have it cleaned up soon." "That's not why I'm here." Robert studied her face, noting the dark circles under her eyes. "Margaret tells me you've been assigned an unusual amount of work lately." "It's, no problem, sir. The guests have specific needs. I'm happy to accommodate them, even when those specific needs seem designed to keep you busy from 3 to 5 every afternoon. The exact hours Ethan is home from school." Abigail's eyes widened slightly before she controlled her expression. "I wouldn't presume to question the guest's motives, Mr. Mitchell, but you've noticed the pattern." She hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. "Yes, but it's not my place to complain." "It is if they're deliberately interfering with my son's well-being." Robert gestured to the water stain. "Was there actually a leak?" Abigail's professional composure wavered. "I found the bathtub overflow valve open when I arrived. It might have been accidental. And yesterday, when Melanie's entire makeup collection somehow spilled across her white bedding minutes before Ethan came home. Accidents happen, sir. 3 accidents a day, all requiring your specific attention, all during Ethan's free time." Robert shook his head. "You don't have to protect them, Abigail. I'm not blind to what's happening here." For a moment, Abigail looked like she might say more, but then she simply returned to scrubbing the carpet. "I should finish this before it sets, sir." Robert recognized her reluctance to speak ill of her employers, even those who were mistreating her. "Very well, but from now on, you'll take your regular breaks at the regular times. If there are emergencies, the other staff can handle them. That's an order, Abigail." "Yes, Mr. Mitchell, thank you." As Robert left Victoria's suite, he nearly collided with the woman herself in the hallway. "Robert, what a pleasant surprise," Victoria purred, though her eyes darted past him to the open door where Abigail was visible. "I was just coming to check on the unfortunate situation with my carpet." "Yes, quite unfortunate," Robert replied neutrally, "though I find the timing rather convenient." Victoria's smile didn't waver. "Whatever do you mean?" "Nothing at all. I've simply instructed the staff that Abigail will be taking her scheduled breaks regardless of any emergencies that might arise. I'm sure you understand the importance of proper labor practices." A flash of annoyance crossed Victoria's face before she composed herself. "Of course, staff welfare is important, though quality service is also essential." "Indeed. And speaking of quality service, I believe you were scheduled to host Ethan for a magic show this afternoon." Victoria blinked in apparent confusion. "Was that today? I thought it was tomorrow. I'll have to check with my assistant." "Please do." Ethan was quite disappointed. "If you'll excuse me, I need to find my son." Robert found Ethan in his bedroom, listlessly arranging dinosaur figures on his shelves. "Hey, buddy," Robert said, sitting on the edge of the bed. "Tough day?" Ethan shrugged. "Abby's busy again, 3rd day in a row." "I know, I'm sorry about that." Robert hesitated, unsure how to navigate the situation. "The ladies who are staying with us, they're making a lot of work for Abby, aren't they?" Ethan looked up, his eyes suddenly sharp. "They're doing it on purpose. They don't want me to spend time with her." The directness of his son's assessment surprised Robert. "What makes you think that?" "I heard them talking in the garden yesterday. Ms. Victoria said Abby was getting in the way, and they needed to keep her busy, so I would spend time with them instead." Ethan's small face hardened. "But I won't. I don't like them. They're fake." Out of the mouths of babes, Robert thought. "Ethan, I want you to know that I've spoken with Abby. She'll be able to take her breaks with you as usual from now on. If anyone tries to interfere with that, you come straight to me, okay?" Ethan nodded, a small spark returning to his eyes. "Okay, can I go find her now?" "Of course." As Ethan hurried from the room, Robert remained sitting on the bed, troubled by the situation. The competition had been his idea, a desperate attempt to find someone who could help his son heal. But instead, it seemed to be creating new problems. The women he'd selected, all accomplished and polished on paper, were showing troubling character flaws, pettiness, deception, manipulation. and they were targeting the one person who seemed to genuinely care about Ethan's well-being. That evening, dinner was a tense affair. The 5 candidates maintained their charming facades, but Robert detected the strain beneath the surface. He decided to test them. "I've been thinking about making some adjustments to the household routine," he announced casually. "Specifically, I'm considering allocating time each day for Ethan to continue his projects with Abigail. She seems to have a positive influence on him." The reactions were immediate and revealing. Victoria's smile tightened. "Is that appropriate? She is staff, after all. Wouldn't Ethan benefit more from relationships with people of his own social standing?" "A child needs guidance from educated individuals," Alexandra added smoothly. "While I'm sure this Abigail is well-meaning, she lacks the credentials to properly mentor someone of Ethan's potential. I was actually planning a series of professionally produced children's activities," Melanie interjected, "much more stimulating than homemade crafts. And I've been concerned about the hygiene aspects of those kitchen projects," Jennifer said with feigned worry. "Home baking can expose children to all sorts of contaminants." Samantha, perhaps the most diplomatic of the group, offered, "What if we incorporated some of Abigail's activities into our own interactions with Ethan? We could elevate them with our professional expertise." Robert nodded thoughtfully, though inwardly he was disturbed by their transparent attempts to undermine Abigail. "I appreciate your input. However, I've made my decision. Ethan will continue to have daily time with Abigail, in addition to spending time with each of you." The women exchanged glances but didn't argue further. Robert noticed Victoria discreetly checking her watch, then making eye contact with the others. Some unspoken communication passed between them. Later that night, unable to sleep, Robert decided to check on the security system. As he passed through the darkened main hall, he heard hushed voices from the library. Approaching quietly, he peered through the partially open door. All 5 women were gathered in a tight circle, their expressions serious in the dim light. "This changes everything," Alexandra was saying. "If Mitchell is officially sanctioning her time with the boy, we need a new strategy." "I told you the direct approach wouldn't work," Jennifer hissed. "Now he's suspicious." "Then we need to be more subtle," Victoria replied. "Instead of keeping her busy, we need to make her look incompetent, unreliable, or inappropriate," Melanie suggested. "If Robert thought she was overstepping bounds, getting too close to Ethan or even to him—" "Exactly," Victoria nodded approvingly. "Men like Robert are protective of their position. If he thought she was trying to rise above her station, pursue him romantically." "That's actually brilliant," Samantha agreed. "We make it look like she's trying to seduce the boss, use the boy to get to the father." "We'll need evidence," Alexandra, ever the lawyer, pointed out. "Suggestive notes, perhaps. Inappropriate attire. Situations that could be misinterpreted." "Leave that to me," Victoria smiled coldly. "I have experience managing troublesome staff. By this time next week, little Miss Perfect will be out on the street where she belongs." Robert withdrew silently, his blood running cold at what he'd overheard. The women he'd invited into his home to potentially become Ethan's mother were plotting to destroy an innocent woman's reputation and livelihood, all to eliminate competition they shouldn't even see as competition. The casual cruelty of it shocked him. He returned to his room, his mind racing. Should he confront them, end the arrangement entirely, warn Abigail? Each option carried complications. If he confronted them, they would simply deny everything and be more careful in the future. If he ended the arrangement, there would be legal implications. The contracts were specific, and warning Abigail might put her in an impossible position, caught between defending herself and maintaining her professional role. The next morning brought a new development. As Robert passed the kitchen, he overheard Ethan's voice, unusually animated, and then the crystals grew all the way to the top of the jar. "Abby says it's because of saturation," Abigail's voice supplied gently. "Yeah, that's when the water can't hold any more of the crystal stuff." Robert paused in the doorway, watching as Abigail and Ethan carefully removed delicate crystal structures from jars of solution. The dining table was covered with newspaper, and both of them wore plastic gloves. "Good morning," Robert said, entering the kitchen. "Dad, look what we made." Ethan held up a pipe cleaner form completely encrusted with blue crystals. "It's like magic ice." "That's incredible," Robert said, genuinely impressed. "How did you do it?" As Ethan launched into an explanation, mixing up scientific terms but conveying genuine enthusiasm, Robert watched Abigail. She stood slightly apart, giving Ethan space to share his accomplishment, her face reflecting quiet pride in his excitement. There was nothing inappropriate or unprofessional in her demeanor, just genuine care for a child blossoming under her attention. The contrast between this scene and the midnight plotting he'd witnessed couldn't be starker. In that moment, Robert made a decision. He wouldn't confront the candidates directly, nor would he end the arrangement prematurely. Instead, he would watch and document, gathering evidence of their true characters. And in the meantime, he would ensure that Abigail was protected from their schemes. "Abigail," he said when Ethan had finished his explanation, "I'd like a word with you in my office when you have a moment." "Of course, Mr. Mitchell. I can come now if that works for you." In his office, Robert closed the door and gestured for Abigail to sit. She perched nervously on the edge of the chair, hands folded in her lap. "First, I want to thank you for what you've done for Ethan," Robert began. "The change in him when he's with you is remarkable. He's a wonderful child, Mr. Mitchell. It's no hardship to spend time with him." "Nevertheless, I appreciate it." Robert leaned forward. "Abigail, I need to ask you something important. Have you noticed any strange occurrences lately? Items moved or tampered with? Communications you didn't send?" Abigail's brow furrowed. "I'm not sure what you mean." "I have reason to believe that some of our guests may attempt to discredit you in some way. They might plant evidence suggesting inappropriate behavior or intentions on your part." Her eyes widened. "Why would they do that?" "Because they see you as competition. Ethan prefers your company to theirs, and that threatens their chances of winning this arrangement." Abigail absorbed this, her expression troubled. "What should I do?" "Be vigilant. Document everything. If you find anything suspicious, notes you didn't write, items in your belongings you don't recognize, bring them directly to me. And Abigail," he added seriously, "do not be alone with any of them if you can avoid it." "You really think they would go that far? Over a competition?" Robert thought of the cold calculation in Victoria's voice the night before. "I do. These are women accustomed to getting what they want, by whatever means necessary." Abigail nodded slowly. "I understand. Thank you for the warning, Mr. Mitchell." As she rose to leave, Robert added, "And Abigail, please call me Robert when we're speaking privately. Mr. Mitchell makes me feel like my father." A small smile touched her lips. "If you're sure that's appropriate, Robert." "I'm sure." After she left, Robert sat at his desk reflecting on the situation. He'd intended this competition to find a mother figure for Ethan, someone who could bring warmth and nurturing back into their lives. Instead, he'd invited a nest of vipers into his home, and the one person who naturally provided exactly what Ethan needed was the young woman who cleaned their rooms and folded their laundry. Life, Robert thought wryly, had a way of confounding expectations. As he turned back to his work, he found himself wondering about Abigail Cooper. What dreams had been deferred when she'd had to leave college? What life she might have built if tragedy hadn't intervened? And he realized with some surprise that he genuinely wanted to know. Outside his window, a gentle rain had begun to fall, washing the vibrant autumn leaves from the trees. Change was coming to the Mitchell estate, though perhaps not in the way Robert had planned. The following days brought a shift in tactics from the 5 candidates. Instead of creating extra work to keep Abigail busy, they began a more insidious campaign. Robert, now hyper-aware of their schemes, noticed the subtle changes immediately. Victoria began finding personal items in unexpected places, her diamond earrings in Abigail's cleaning cart, her designer scarf tucked into a supply closet Abigail used. Each time, she would make a grand show of giving Abigail the benefit of the doubt. "I'm sure there's a perfectly reasonable explanation for how my $15,000 bracelet ended up in your pocket, dear," she would say loudly enough for staff and other candidates to hear. Melanie started leaving her designer handbags open, with cash visibly displayed whenever Abigail was scheduled to clean her room. Then she would casually mention to anyone who would listen that her money seemed to be disappearing. Alexandra took a different approach, leaving printouts of jobs at Mitchell Enterprises conspicuously visible with Abigail's name written on applications, suggesting the housekeeper was trying to climb the corporate ladder through her connection to Ethan. Jennifer began claiming allergic reactions to products she insisted Abigail must be using, though the housekeeper used only the mansion's standard supplies. "And my throat just closes up whenever I touch anything in my bathroom," she complained dramatically. "It must be whatever cheap perfume the cleaning girl wears." Samantha, perhaps the least aggressive but no less deliberate, began rearranging Ethan's room and claiming it was Abigail who was changing things without permission, creating a safety hazard for the boy. Throughout it all, Abigail maintained her composure, neither defending herself aggressively nor withdrawing from her duties. She brought any found items directly to Margaret, documented each interaction meticulously as Robert had suggested, and continued to provide Ethan with the steady, gentle presence he needed. Robert, for his part, made no direct accusations but quietly gathered evidence. He instructed security to save all surveillance footage, had Margaret document every complaint and its resolution, and kept detailed notes of his own observations. He was building a case, though for what exactly, he wasn't yet sure. 10 days. Into the competition, Robert was reviewing paperwork in his study when a commotion erupted in the main hall. He arrived to find Victoria gesticulating wildly at Abigail, who stood pale but composed, arms folded protectively across her chest. "I want her searched immediately," Victoria was demanding. "My grandmother's sapphire pendant is missing, and I know exactly who took it." "Ms. Hawthorne," Margaret was saying placatingly, "we have protocols for missing items if you'll just fill out a—" "Protocols?" Victoria scoffed. "This is theft. A family heirloom worth over $100,000. Robert stepped forward. "What's happening here?" Victoria turned to him, her face a perfect mask of distress. "Robert, I hate to be the one to tell you this, but your housekeeper has been systematically stealing from your guests. My grandmother's pendant, the one I showed you just yesterday, is gone, and she was the only one in my room this morning." "That's not true," Abigail said quietly. "I haven't been in Miss Hawthorne's room today. Mrs. Winters reassigned me to the East Wing because Miss Morgan complained about dust in the air vents." "Lies," Victoria snapped. "I saw you leaving my suite myself." Robert turned to Margaret. "Can you verify Abigail's assignment today?" Margaret nodded. "Yes, Mr. Mitchell. She's been working in the East Wing all morning. Ms. Morgan requested a complete cleaning of her ventilation system." Victoria's confidence faltered momentarily before she rallied. "Well, she must have slipped away at some point. The pendant is gone, and valuable items have been disappearing ever since she started." "Working here." "Actually," Robert said calmly, "according to our records, there have been no reported thefts in this household until the 5 of you arrived. Now suddenly we have daily incidents?" He turned to security personnel who had arrived at the commotion. "Frank, please review today's surveillance footage for Ms. Hawthorne's suite. Let's see who has been in and out." Victoria blanched. "Surveillance footage? You have cameras in our rooms?" "Not in the bedrooms or bathrooms, of course," Robert assured her. "But the hallways, sitting rooms, and entrances are all monitored, standard security for a property of this value." While they awaited the footage, Robert noticed the other 4 candidates had gathered, watching the scene with varying expressions. Melanie looked nervous, Alexandra calculating, Jennifer smug, and Samantha uncomfortable. Frank returned promptly with a tablet. "Here's the footage, sir. Only 2 people entered Ms. Hawthorne's suite today. Ms. Hawthorne herself at 7:15 a.m. and again at 8:45 a.m. and—" He hesitated. "And?" Robert prompted. "And Ms. Calloway at 9:30 a.m. She remained for approximately 12 minutes. All eyes turned to Jennifer, who immediately flushed. I was borrowing her facial toner. She said I could." Victoria's eyes narrowed dangerously. "I said no such thing. and my pendant was on my vanity this morning when I left for breakfast. Robert turned to Frank again. Continue monitoring the situation. If the pendant turns up, I want to know immediately. To Victoria, he added, I suggest you search your suite thoroughly before making further accusations. Items are often misplaced. I don't misplace $100,000 heirlooms, Victoria sniffed, but her indignation seemed forced now. As the gathering dispersed, Robert gestured for Abigail to follow him to his office. Once inside, he closed the door and let out a long breath. I'm sorry you had to experience that, he said sincerely. Are you all right? Abigail nodded, though her hands trembled slightly. It's not the first time someone has accused household staff of theft, though usually there's at least a missing item. You think Victoria fabricated the whole thing? I don't know. The pendant might be missing, but if it is, I certainly didn't take it. Abigail hesitated, then added, though I did notice Dr. Calloway and Miss Hawthorne arguing yesterday, something about borrowed jewelry not being returned promptly. Robert made a note of this. The situation is escalating faster than I anticipated. They're getting desperate. Because the competition is halfway over, Abigail asked. Partly that, but also because none of them have managed to connect with Ethan. Robert ran a hand through his hair. He still spends every free moment with you. Yesterday, he declined a trip to the planetarium with Alexandra to help you fold laundry. Abigail looked troubled. Perhaps I should step back, create some distance. If this is causing such problems... Absolutely not, Robert interrupted firmly. You're the only one who's been able to reach him since Catherine, since we lost her. I won't sacrifice my son's well-being to appease their jealousy. A silence fell between them, weighted with unspoken complications. May I ask you something personal, Abigail? She looked surprised but nodded. Margaret mentioned, you studied paleontology before you had to leave college. Is that a passion you still hold? A soft smile touched Abigail's face. Yes, I've loved dinosaurs since I was younger than Ethan. My parents took me to the Natural History Museum every year for my birthday. Her expression clouded briefly at the mention of her parents. I still read research papers when I can. The field is always evolving. Why not go back? Finish your degree. Abigail's smile turned wistful. Life doesn't always allow for second chances, Robert. College is expensive, and I have responsibilities. My aunt depends on my income for her care. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to pry. It's fine, I've made peace with it, and I enjoy my work here, especially... She stopped herself. Especially getting to know Ethan, she finished, her cheeks coloring slightly. He reminds me of myself at that age, curious about everything, full of questions. Robert studied her, struck by the genuine affection in her voice when she spoke. Of his son, not the calculated interest the candidates displayed, but real warmth. Thank you, he said simply, for being good to him, for seeing him as he is, not as an accessory or a stepping stone. Abigail met his gaze directly. He's a child who lost his mother. He deserves gentleness and understanding, not competition for his affection. Before Robert could respond, a sharp knock came at the door. Margaret entered, looking concerned. Mr. Mitchell, Miss Hawthorne's pendant has been found. Where? Robert asked, relieved but suspicious. Margaret's gaze flicked to Abigail. In Ethan's dinosaur collection, hidden inside the Tyrannosaurus. Model! Abigail gasped. That's impossible. Ethan would never... Of course he wouldn't, Robert agreed immediately. This is a plant. Someone's trying to kill two birds with one stone. Frame you for theft and drive a wedge between you and Ethan. It gets worse, Margaret added grimly. Ms. Hawthorne is suggesting to the others that Abigail may have manipulated Ethan into taking it as some sort of loyalty test. She's spinning quite a narrative. Robert's jaw tightened. Where is Ethan now? In his room. Ms. Hawthorne attempted to speak with him, but he became upset and locked himself in. He's refusing to come out. Robert was on his feet immediately. I need to see him. And I should return to work, Abigail said quietly, before there are more accusations. No, Robert decided. Come with me. Ethan trusts you. He'll talk to you. Together they hurried to Ethan's room, finding all 5 candidates clustered outside his door. Victoria was speaking through the keyhole in a sickeningly sweet voice. Darling, no one's angry with you. We just want to understand why you took Auntie Victoria's special necklace. Did someone ask you to? Get away from my son's door, Robert said coldly, causing the women to jump and turn. Robert! Victoria composed herself quickly. We're just trying to help. The poor boy is obviously confused. That woman, she shot a venomous glance at Abigail, has been filling his head with who knows what ideas. Ethan, Robert called, ignoring Victoria completely. It's Dad, can you open the door? Silence from within. Abigail stepped forward. Ethan, it's Abby. You're not in trouble, I promise. Will you let us in? The lock clicked immediately, and the door opened just enough to reveal one of Ethan's blue eyes. He surveyed the crowd anxiously before opening the door wider to admit only his father and Abigail. The lock clicked again behind them. Inside, Ethan was clearly distraught, his eyes red from crying. I didn't take it, Dad. I swear I didn't. Robert knelt to his level. I know you didn't, buddy. I believe you. They said Abby would have to leave because of what I did, Ethan choked out, but I didn't do anything. Abigail sat on the edge of his bed. No one's making me leave. Ethan, your dad knows the truth. Someone is trying to cause trouble, Robert explained gently. They put the necklace in your dinosaur to make it look like you took it. But we know better. It was those ladies, wasn't it? Ethan's perception startled Robert again. They don't like Abby because you and I do. Robert exchanged glances with Abigail, unsure how to navigate this delicate territory with an 8-year-old. Sometimes adults don't behave very well, Abigail said carefully. They can be jealous or insecure, just like kids sometimes. But that doesn't make their behavior okay. They're supposed to be competing to be my new mum, Ethan said bitterly. But I don't want any of them. They're mean and fake. The arrangement was my idea, Ethan, Robert admitted. I thought you needed a mother figure, someone to help fill the space Mom left. Ethan looked at his father with those startlingly wise eyes. Nobody can replace Mom, but I don't need those ladies. I have Abby. The simplicity of his statement hung in the air between the three of them. Robert felt something shift in his chest, a recognition of what had been in front of him all along. A hammering on the door interrupted the moment. Robert, Victoria's voice called imperiously. This situation needs to be addressed immediately. The boy must be disciplined for taking my property. Robert stood, his patience finally exhausted. Stay here with Abby, he told Ethan. I'll handle this. He opened the door just enough to step through, then firmly closed it behind him, facing the 5 women in the hallway. This charade has gone on long enough, he said, his voice low and controlled. My son did not take your pendant, Victoria. It was planted in his room, almost certainly by one of you. The security footage will tell us who. How dare you accuse us? Victoria gasped theatrically. After we've been nothing but gracious guests in your home. Gracious, Robert's laugh was without humor. You've bullied my staff, attempted to frame an innocent woman for theft, traumatized my son and violated the terms of our agreement at every turn. I've been watching all of you, documenting everything. The catty remarks, the sabotage, the lies. The women exchanged alarmed glances. Surely you're overreacting, Alexandra attempted to salvage the situation. We're all under pressure in this unusual arrangement. Pressure doesn't excuse cruelty, Robert replied coldly. I invited you here to find a nurturing presence for my son. Instead, I got manipulation and deception. The only person in this entire household who has genuinely cared about Ethan's well-being is the woman you've been trying to destroy. The maid, Jennifer scoffed, dropping all pretense of concern. Please, Robert, she's obviously using the boy to get to you. It's the oldest trick in the book. Seduce the lonely widower through his vulnerable child. Robert's eyes flashed dangerously. That statement tells me everything I need to know about your character, Dr. Calloway. Abigail has never once behaved inappropriately. She's been nothing but professional, kind, and patient, despite the horrendous treatment she's received at your hands. You can't possibly be developing feelings for the help, Victoria said incredulously. Robert, think of your position, your social standing. My position? Robert stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more weight than a shout. My position is as Ethan's father. His well-being is my only concern. And right now, you five are the greatest threat to that well-being I've seen since we lost his mother. Melanie, sensing the wind changing direction, attempted damage control. We may have gotten carried away, Robert. Competition brings out the worst sometimes. But we can start fresh, focus on what's really important, finding the right mother for Ethan. That's exactly what I intend to do, Robert replied. But first, I need to address the immediate situation. Victoria, your pendant has been found and will be returned to you. There will be no more accusations against my son or my staff. Is that clear? Victoria nodded stiffly, her eyes cold with fury. Good. Now you all signed contracts for a 30-day stay. We're currently at day 15. While I could probably void those contracts based on your behavior, I'm going to honor the original agreement. The competition continues, but, he held up a warning finger, if there is even one more incident of sabotage, false accusations, or mistreatment of Abigail or any other staff member, the offending party will be immediately removed from my home and will face legal consequences. Am I understood? 5 tight nods answered him. Excellent. Now, I suggest you all find productive ways to demonstrate why you might make suitable role models for an impressionable child, because so far none of you have shown qualities I'd want my son to emulate. With that, Robert turned and re-entered Ethan's room, leaving 5 stunned women in the hallway. Inside, he found Ethan showing Abigail his latest dinosaur book, his earlier distress seemingly forgotten in her calming presence. Everything okay, Dad? Ethan asked. Getting there, Robert assured him, sitting down beside them on the bed. I made it clear that no one is to bother either of you anymore. Did you yell at them? Ethan asked hopefully. Robert smiled. No yelling required. Sometimes, speaking very quietly works better. That's what Mom used to say, Ethan remembered. She said yelling means you've already lost the argument. She was a wise woman, your mum, Robert agreed, his throat tightening. She would have liked Abby, Ethan said with the absolute certainty of childhood. They both make the best cookies and know all the dinosaur names. Abigail's eyes glistened at this highest of compliments. I wish I could have met her, Ethan. She sounds wonderful. She was, Robert said softly. She would have handled this situation much better than I have. I think you're doing fine, Dad, Ethan said, leaning against his father's arm. Even if you did invite those mean ladies to our house. Despite everything, Robert laughed. Not my finest decision, I'll admit. What happens now? Abigail asked, her voice hesitant. With the competition? Robert considered the question carefully. Officially, it continues. The candidates will remain for the agreed-upon time, but unofficially, he looked at his son. I think Ethan and I need to have some serious discussions about what kind of family we want to build. Just us is okay too, Dad, Ethan said, surprising Robert once again with his perception. We don't need anyone else if they're not right. Robert pulled his son close. You're pretty smart for an 8-year-old, you know that. Abby says, I'm an old soul. Abby might be right. Outside the bedroom window, the autumn sun was setting, casting long shadows across the manicured lawn. Somewhere in the mansion, 5 ambitious women were regrouping, recalculating, planning their next moves. But here in this quiet room with dinosaur posters on the walls and paper stars hanging from the ceiling, Robert felt a peace he hadn't experienced in months. Whatever happened with the competition, he realized, the most important outcome had already been achieved. His son was healing, finding his voice again. And that had happened not because of his elaborate plan, but because of the simple kindness of a young woman who had faced her own losses and emerged with her compassion intact. As Ethan flipped through his dinosaur book, pointing out his favorites, to Abigail, Robert watched them together, a thought taking shape in his mind. Perhaps the answer to his family's future had been under his roof all along, quietly folding laundry and making paper stars. The incident with Victoria's pendant marked a turning point at the Mitchell estate. In its aftermath, the 5 candidates adopted a new strategy, outward civility masking inward calculation. They stopped their overt attacks on Abigail, instead redoubling their efforts to win over Ethan and Robert with increasingly elaborate gestures. Victoria arranged for a world-renowned children's author to give Ethan a private reading of his latest unpublished work. Melanie transformed the conservatory into an indoor carnival, complete with games and prizes. Alexandra organized a private tour of the Supreme Court, including lunch with a justice she claimed was a personal friend. Jennifer brought in exotic animals from a wildlife conservation center. Samantha designed an elaborate custom playhouse to be built in the garden. Ethan endured these excursions and experiences with polite detachment. He would thank each woman dutifully but retreat to his room or seek out Abigail as soon as propriety allowed. The candidates grew increasingly frustrated but maintained their composed facades, at least when Robert was watching. For his part, Robert had begun a thorough but discreet investigation. In his private office, a large whiteboard had been installed, now covered with notes, connections, and timelines. His security team had been tasked with background checks more extensive than the preliminary ones performed before the competition began. Margaret was reviewing the candidates' public statements and social media histories for inconsistencies. 3 days after the pendant incident, Robert sat reviewing the preliminary findings when Margaret entered with a thick folder. "The initial reports, sir," she said, placing it on his desk. "There are discrepancies." Robert opened the folder, scanning the contents. "Summarize for me." Margaret consulted her tablet. "Victoria Hawthorne claims to come from old money, but our research indicates her grandfather was actually a factory worker who won the lottery in the 1970s. Her family heirlooms were all purchased within the last decade." "Interesting," Robert murmured. "Continue." "Melanie Roberts presents herself as an independent influencer, but she's actually controlled by a management company that scripts most of her content and owns her image rights. Her claimed spontaneous lifestyle is meticulously planned by a team of marketers. Not entirely surprising, but good to know. Alexandra Morgan's legal career includes some questionable tactics. She's been reprimanded twice by ethics committees, and there are sealed court documents related to witness intimidation allegations." Robert's eyebrows rose. "That's concerning. What about Jennifer? Dr. Calloway's medical credentials are legitimate, but her revolutionary skincare line contains ingredients banned in several countries for safety concerns. There are 3 pending lawsuits related to adverse reactions that her legal team has managed to keep quiet." "And Samantha?" "Ms. Peters appears mostly as presented, though she takes credit for architectural designs primarily created by junior associates at her firm. There's also a pattern of romantic relationships with wealthy clients who subsequently hire her for major projects." Robert processed this information, adding notes to his whiteboard. "And what about Abigail? What did the deep background check reveal?" Margaret's expression softened slightly. "Nothing concerning. Her parents did die in a car accident when she was 20. She was in her second year at Boston University, studying paleontology with a minor in education. She left to care for her Aunt Eleanor, her only remaining family, who suffers from early-onset dementia. She's worked steadily ever since, always with excellent references. No criminal record, not even a parking ticket. The only unusual finding was an academic paper she co-authored as an undergraduate that was published in a scientific journal. Apparently, she discovered an anomaly in a fossil specimen that changed the classification of a certain dinosaur species." Robert looked up, surprised. "She published in a scientific journal as an undergraduate?" "Yes, sir," her professor noted, in a recommendation letter that she was one of the most promising students he'd ever taught. Robert fell silent, contemplating this new information. Abigail had never mentioned her academic achievement, though it clearly represented a significant accomplishment. Her humility stood in stark contrast to the candidate's constant self-promotion. "What about personal relationships?" he asked, then immediately felt uncomfortable about prying into Abigail's private life. If Margaret shared his discomfort, she didn't show it. "There's a former boyfriend from college who posted about their breakup after she left school. He characterized it as her choosing family obligation over their relationship. No serious relationships noted since then, though her social media presence is minimal." "Thank you, Margaret. This is helpful." Robert closed the folder, his mind working through implications. Please continue monitoring the candidates. I want to know if any of them violate the terms of their agreements or attempt to resume their campaign against Abigail." "Of course, sir. And what about the surveillance cameras you asked to be installed? Have they captured anything noteworthy?" Margaret consulted her tablet again. Several concerning interactions. Last night, Victoria and Alexandra were recorded in the garden discussing what they called Plan B, apparently involving someone named Carson, who they've hired to dig up dirt on Abigail. Robert frowned. "They've hired a private investigator?" "It appears so. They mentioned wanting to find anything that would disqualify her in Robert's eyes." "Their words, sir." "Anything else?" Melanie and Jennifer were recorded discussing how to isolate the boy from Abigail's influence. Jennifer suggested that a medical intervention might be necessary, claiming Ethan shows signs of unhealthy attachment disorder that requires treatment. Robert's frown deepened. "She's inventing medical conditions now? That crosses a line." "There's more," Margaret continued. "Samantha seems to be distancing herself from the others. She was recorded in a phone call telling someone that the situation has gotten out of hand and that she's not comfortable with the direction things are taking. She mentioned possibly withdrawing from the arrangement." "Interesting. Monitor that development closely." Robert stood, stretching his back after hours at his desk. "And what about Ethan? How has he been today?" Margaret smiled. "Actually, quite well. He and Abigail built a model volcano in the kitchen. The eruption was quite spectacular, according to Chef Mike. Apparently, Ethan has been talking about becoming a volcanologist." "A what?" "Someone who studies volcanoes, sir." Robert laughed. "Last week it was paleontology, before that astronomy. His interests are expanding." "Children need exploration," Margaret observed. "It helps them find their path." "Yes," Robert agreed thoughtfully, "though some paths are harder than others." That afternoon, Robert decided to observe his son's interactions with the candidates firsthand. He arranged to work from the library, which afforded him a view of the main garden where Victoria had organized an elaborate tea party for Ethan, complete with a professional string quartet and a pastry chef creating custom desserts. Ethan sat stiffly at the garden table, dressed in a formal outfit Victoria had selected, looking uncomfortable as she introduced him to the musicians. "This is Ethan Mitchell," she announced grandly. "He's developing quite an ear for classical music, aren't you, darling?" Ethan mumbled something inaudible. "The boy is simply being modest," Victoria told the musicians. "Just yesterday he was telling me how much he adores Vivaldi. We're thinking of starting him on violin lessons next month." Robert frowned. Ethan had never expressed any interest in Vivaldi or violin lessons. Victoria was fabricating shared experiences that had never occurred. Through the window, he watched Victoria orchestrate the entire tea party like a theatrical production, positioning Ethan for what appeared to be professional photographs, instructing him on proper etiquette, and generally treating him more like an accessory than a child. Ethan complied mechanically, his expression blank. When Victoria stepped away to speak with the caterer, Ethan's gaze drifted to the east wing of the house. Following his son's line of sight, Robert spotted Abigail hanging laundry on a clothesline in the staff area. Even at this distance, he could see Ethan's posture relax slightly just at the sight of her. Victoria noticed this shift in attention and quickly moved to block Ethan's view, redirecting him to the pastry display with an overly bright voice. Robert made a note on his tablet and continued watching. After an hour of the staged tea party, Robert had seen enough. He made his way to the garden, approaching the elaborate setup with a casual air. "This looks festive," he commented, noting how Victoria immediately adopted a more intimate pose, as if they were co-hosting the event. "Robert, perfect timing. Ethan and I were just discussing his music education. I've taken the liberty of contacting Juilliard about their youth program." "That's quite an assumption," Robert replied mildly. "Ethan hasn't mentioned any interest in formal music training to me." Victoria laughed lightly. "Children don't always know what opportunities they should pursue. That's where proper guidance comes in." "Proper guidance means listening to their actual interests," Robert countered, turning to his son. "Ethan, are you enjoying yourself?" Ethan glanced between his father and Victoria before answering honestly. The cake is good, but the music is kinda boring and this collar itches. Victoria's smile tightened. Children often resist cultural refinement initially, with consistent exposure. I think Ethan's had enough cultural refinement for one afternoon, Robert interrupted. Why don't you go change into something comfortable, buddy? I think Abby mentioned something about finishing that volcano experiment. Ethan's face lit up. Can I really go? Of course. Thank your hostess first. Thank you for the tea party. Miss Victoria, Ethan recited dutifully before scampering away, loosening his bow tie as he went. Victoria's pleasant facade cracked slightly. You undermine my efforts at every turn, Robert. How am I supposed to bond with the boy if you send him running to the maid the moment he shows the slightest discomfort? Ethan isn't a project to be molded, Victoria. He's a child who needs authentic connection, not staged photo opportunities. This coming from the man who organized a literal competition for a new mother, Victoria shot back. Don't pretend this whole arrangement isn't about appearances. Robert absorbed the criticism, recognizing the partial truth in it. Perhaps my initial concept was flawed, he acknowledged, but that doesn't justify manipulating an 8-year-old's preferences or manufacturing experiences that never happened. Ethan has never once mentioned Vivaldi to you. Victoria's expression hardened. You're making a mistake, Robert. That girl has cleverly positioned herself using your son to get close to you. It's a classic move. The humble, virtuous employee who doesn't care about money, yet somehow ends up with access to everything. Your cynicism is showing, Robert observed. Not everyone operates with ulterior motives. Everyone has motives, Victoria insisted. I'm just honest about mine. I want a compatible partner with the right social standing. You want a mother figure for your son. It's a reasonable exchange. But that girl? What exactly is her end game? If not securing herself a wealthy husband and instant family, perhaps her end game is simply being kind to a child who needed kindness, Robert suggested. Not everyone measures relationships in terms of transactions, Victoria. How charmingly naive for a billionaire businessman, Victoria scoffed. Did you know your perfect little Cinderella has been meeting with lawyers in town? My investigator saw her entering Wilson and Parnell's offices yesterday. Family law specialists, in case you're curious. Robert felt a cold sensation in his stomach. You really did hire someone to follow her. Victoria realized her mistake too late. It's standard due diligence. You would do the same for any business acquisition. Abigail is not a business acquisition. She's a person who works for me, who has shown nothing but integrity and compassion. Robert's voice remained steady, though his anger was building. Your investigator is trespassing on private property and harassing my employee. It stops now, Victoria. Or what? You'll remove me from the competition, she laughed bitterly. That would violate our contract. My lawyers would have a field day. I'm not concerned about your lawyers, Robert replied coldly, but you should be concerned about mine if your harassment continues. The contract protects you from arbitrary dismissal, not from consequences for illegal actions. Leaving Victoria seething in the garden, Robert returned to the house troubled by the accusation about Abigail meeting with lawyers. It could be innocuous, perhaps related to her aunt's care or personal matters, but the mention of family law, specialists nagged at him. He found himself walking toward the East Wing, where the staff quarters were located. He'd never actually seen Abigail's living space before, realizing with some discomfort that he knew very little about her daily life, beyond her interactions with Ethan. Mrs. Winters intercepted him in the hallway, surprised by his presence in this part of the house. Mr. Mitchell, can I assist you with something? I'm looking for Abigail. Is she in her quarters? No, sir. She and Master Ethan are in the kitchen with that volcano project. Mrs. Winters hesitated. Is everything all right, sir? There hasn't been another incident? No, nothing like that. I just wanted to speak with her. Robert paused, then added, Mrs. Winters, you've been with the household for over 20 years. What's your impression of Abigail? The head housekeeper's expression softened. One of the finest young women I've ever had on staff, Mr. Mitchell. Hardworking, honest, never complains even when those ladies have been running her ragged with their demands. And she's wonderful with Master Ethan. Reminds me of how Miss Catherine was with him, Patient, always making things into learning experiences. Robert nodded, absorbing this comparison to his late wife. Thank you, Mrs. Winters. That's helpful to know. In the kitchen, Robert found a scene of controlled chaos. A large model volcano occupied the center island, surrounded by various containers of colored liquids. Ethan, now changed into casual clothes, was carefully measuring baking soda while Abigail prepared what appeared to be vinegar mixed with red food coloring. "Dad," Ethan called excitedly, "we're making it erupt again, but this time with different chemicals to create a bigger reaction." "Supervised, of course," Abigail added, quickly, noticing Robert's momentary concern. "The worst that can happen is a messy countertop." "I'm not worried," Robert assured her, leaning against the doorframe to watch. "You two seem to have things well in hand." "Abby knows all about chemical reactions," Ethan informed him seriously. "She says volcanology is chemistry and geology, and physics all mixed together." "Is that so?" Robert smiled at Abigail. "You're quite the Renaissance woman." A blush colored her cheeks. "Hardly. I just read a lot. When you work in quiet houses while everyone's away, books become good friends." "Okay, I think we're ready," Ethan announced, placing the last measure of baking soda into the volcano's crater. "Countdown 3, 2, 1. Abigail poured the red vinegar solution into the opening, and immediately the volcano began to foam and erupt, red liquid cascading down its sides. Ethan whooped with delight. "Look at the chemical reaction, Dad. The acid and base create carbon dioxide gas that pushes everything up and out." "Very impressive," Robert laughed, genuinely entertained by his son's enthusiasm. "Though I hope Chef Mike approved this use of his kitchen." "He helped us mix the first batch," Abigail admitted. "He's got a soft spot for science experiments." As they began cleaning up the eruption, Robert observed the easy teamwork between Abigail and Ethan, the way she guided without dictating, encouraged without pressuring. There was a natural rhythm to their interaction that couldn't be manufactured or forced. "Ethan, would you mind if I borrowed Abby for a few minutes? I need to discuss something with her." "Is she in trouble because of the mess?" Ethan asked immediately, his protective instinct surfacing. "It was my idea to add extra baking soda." "No trouble at all," Robert assured him. "Just a quick grown-up conversation." "Okay, but hurry back. We still need to document our observations in the science journal." Robert led Abigail to his study, closing the door for privacy. She stood somewhat awkwardly, still wearing an apron with volcanic lava stains. "I'm sorry about my appearance," she began. "I didn't expect to be called to your office mid-experiment." "Please, don't apologize. Volcanic eruptions are messy business." Robert gestured for her to sit. "I wanted to ask you something, and I hope you'll be candid with me." Abigail nodded, though she looked apprehensive. "Were you at Wilson and Parnell's law offices yesterday?" Her eyes widened in surprise. "Yes, but how did you—" Understanding dawned. "They're having me followed, aren't they?" "The candidates." Robert nodded grimly. "Victoria hired someone. I've instructed security to keep an eye out for this person and remove them from the property if spotted. But I need to know, Abigail. Why? Were you consulting with family law specialists?" Abigail looked down at her hands, her discomfort evident. "It's about my Aunt Eleanor. Her condition is worsening, and I need to establish legal guardianship to make medical decisions on her behalf. Wilson and Parnell offers pro bono services for cases like mine." Relief washed over Robert, followed immediately by shame for having doubted her. "I see. I'm sorry for questioning you, and I'm sorry about your aunt." "Why would you think I was meeting with lawyers?" Abigail asked. Then realization crossed her face. "They suggested I was planning some kind of legal action against you, didn't they?" "Something like that," Robert admitted. "Victoria implied you might have ulterior motives for your relationship with Ethan." Abigail's expression hardened uncharacteristically. "That's despicable. Ethan is a child who needed a friend, not a pawn in some game. I would never use him for personal gain." "I know that," Robert said quickly. "I never believed it. But I needed to ask directly, rather than let suspicions fester." Abigail nodded, accepting this. "I understand and I appreciate your directness." She hesitated before adding, Robert, may I speak candidly as well? Of course. This competition, it's hurting Ethan more than helping him. He feels like a prize to be won, not a child to be loved. Those women don't see him. They see the role he represents, the access to you he provides. It's not healthy for him. Robert sighed heavily. I know. I realized my mistake too late, and now I'm contractually bound to see it through. But I promise you, Abigail, none of them will be chosen if they continue to demonstrate such fundamental character flaws. It's not my place to criticize your decisions, Abigail said carefully. But as someone who cares about Ethan, I felt I needed to speak up. Your place, Robert repeated, finding the phrase jarring. Abigail, you've done more for my son's well-being in 4 months than these qualified candidates have managed in 2 weeks. Your perspective isn't just valid, it's essential. Their eyes met across the desk, a moment of perfect understanding passing between them. In that instant, Robert felt a connection he hadn't experienced since Catherine. Not romantic, necessarily, but deeply human. A recognition of shared values and genuine concern for his son. The moment was broken by a sharp knock at the door. Margaret entered, her expression urgent. Mr. Mitchell, there's been an incident. You're needed in the main hall immediately. Robert and Abigail exchanged concerned glances before hurrying after Margaret. In the grand entrance hall, they found a scene of chaos. Alexandra and Jennifer were physically restraining Samantha, who appeared to be trying to leave with her luggage. Victoria and Melanie stood nearby, arguing loudly. You can't just walk away, Victoria was shouting. We had an agreement. I want no part of this anymore, Samantha shot back, struggling against the other women's grip. You've all lost your minds. He's just a little boy, for God's sake. What is going on here? Robert demanded, his voice cutting through the commotion. All 5 women froze, suddenly aware of his presence. Samantha wrenched herself free and turned to face him. I'm withdrawing from the arrangement, Robert. I can't continue with this farce. You can't withdraw without penalties, Alexandra reminded her sharply. The contract is explicit. I don't care about the money, Samantha replied. Some things are more important than financial considerations. Robert held up a hand for silence. Samantha, if you wish to withdraw, that's your right. We can discuss terms privately. The rest of you release her immediately and step back. Alexandra and Jennifer reluctantly complied, moving to stand with Victoria and Melanie. The 4 of them presented a united front, while Samantha stood apart, her posture defeated. Now, Robert continued calmly, would someone explain what precipitated this confrontation? The women exchanged glances, none willing to speak first. Finally, Samantha broke the silence. They've hired someone to fabricate evidence against Abigail, false documents suggesting misconduct at previous employers, manipulated photographs, even a fake ex-boyfriend willing to claim she's unstable and opportunistic. She looked at Abigail apologetically. I refused to contribute to the scheme. That's when they turned on me, threatening to release supposedly embarrassing information about my past if I didn't cooperate or if I warned you. Robert's expression darkened. Is this true? Victoria stepped forward, abandoning pretense. We're fighting for our future, Robert. This competition was your idea. You invited us here to compete for a position in your family. We're simply using the resources at our disposal. By manufacturing lies about an innocent person? By threatening and blackmailing each other? Robert's voice was deadly quiet. That's not competition, that's criminal behavior. Oh, don't be so dramatic, Jennifer scoffed. It's strategy. You of all people should understand that. Didn't you once say that business is war by other means? This isn't business. This is my family. My son. Robert turned to Abigail, who stood silent and pale beside him. I am so deeply sorry that my foolish arrangement has subjected you to this. Then, addressing all 5 candidates, he continued. The competition is over. You've all disqualified yourselves through your actions. You have until tomorrow morning to vacate my property. You can't do that, Alexandra objected immediately. The contract includes moral character clauses that you've all violated, Robert interrupted. Conspiracy, harassment, hiring private investigators to stalk my employees, all documented by my security team. Challenge my decision. if you wish, but be prepared for very public legal proceedings where all your behavior will be examined in detail. The threat of public exposure seemed to hit home. Even Victoria, the most combative of the group, fell silent. Margaret will assist with your departure arrangements, Robert concluded. I suggest you use the remaining hours to reflect on the kind of people you've shown yourselves to be. Taking Abigail gently by the elbow, he guided her away from the stunned women toward the kitchen where Ethan was still waiting. Behind them, Samantha quietly asked Margaret for help with her luggage, while the other four began recriminating in harsh whispers. "Are you all right?" Robert asked Abigail when they were out of earshot. She nodded, though she looked shaken. "I knew they disliked me, but I never imagined they'd go to such lengths." "Neither did I. I've put you in an impossible position, and for that, I am truly sorry." "You couldn't have known," Abigail said generously. "You were trying to do what you thought was best for Ethan." They paused outside the kitchen, hearing Ethan's voice inside as he apparently continued his scientific documentation independently. The volcano produced significant eruptive material, approximately 27 centimeters in height, he was dictating, seriously to himself. Further experimentation is required to optimize the chemical reaction. Despite everything, Robert and Abigail shared a smile at his earnest scientific approach. "He sounds like a true researcher," Robert observed. "He has such a curious mind," Abigail agreed. "With the right encouragement, he could become anything he sets his heart on. Thanks to you, he's finding his voice again." Robert hesitated, then added quietly, "When this is all over, when they're gone, I'd like to talk about your future, Abigail. Not as my housekeeper, but as someone who's become important to both Ethan and me." Abigail's eyes widened slightly. "My future?" "If you're interested," Robert clarified. "No pressure, just possibilities." Before she could respond, Ethan's head popped around the doorframe. "Are you two done with your grown-up talk? The volcano needs more testing." "We're coming," Robert assured him, the serious conversation tabled for now. "Science waits for no man, not even billionaire businessmen." As they rejoined Ethan in the kitchen, Robert felt as though a weight had been lifted. The competition had been a mistake, but ending it was the first step towards something potentially much more authentic. Whatever came next, it would be based on genuine connection, not calculated performance. Outside, the autumn sun was setting over the estate grounds, the shadows growing long across the manicured lawns. Change was coming to the Mitchell household, not the change Robert had planned, but perhaps the change they all needed. The morning after the confrontation in the entrance hall, Robert sat in his study, watching the security footage of the candidates' departures. Victoria had left in a cloud of indignation, instructing her driver to handle her luggage with exaggerated care, while she refused to acknowledge any of the staff. Alexandra had departed with clinical efficiency, already on her phone with what sounded like legal counsel. Jennifer had made a scene about alleged missing items, demanding a thorough search of her luggage by security, perhaps hoping to plant something incriminating at the last moment. Melanie had attempted to salvage her image, leaving tearful apologies with staff members, while her assistant filmed the performance from multiple angles. Only Samantha had left with dignity, personally thanking each staff member who had attended. To her and leaving generous tips despite her early departure, she had asked to speak with Robert before leaving, and he had granted her a brief audience. "I want you to know I never participated in their schemes against Abigail," she had told him earnestly. "I was uncomfortable from the beginning with how they treated her, but I should have spoken up sooner. For that I apologize." "Why did you enter this arrangement in the first place?" Robert had asked, curious about her motives. Samantha had smiled ruefully. "Honestly, professional advancement. The chance to design for someone of your stature would have been transformative for my career, but I realized I was putting my ambition ahead of a child's well-being, and that's not who I want to be." Robert had appreciated her honesty. "Your integrity ultimately showed through, Samantha. I'll remember that if you ever wish to submit a proposal for a future Mitchell Enterprises project. Now, with the mansion quieter than it had been in weeks, Robert faced a dilemma. He had ended the competition, but the agreement had included a public announcement of the results. The 5 candidates had already hinted to their social circles about their participation. Questions would inevitably arise about why no selection had been made. Moreover, Robert wasn't satisfied with simply sending them away. Their behavior, the cruelty, the manipulation, the attempted character assassination, deserved consequences. Yet any direct legal action would drag Ethan into the spotlight and potentially expose Abigail to further harassment. As he contemplated his options, Margaret entered with her usual impeccable timing. "You have that look, sir," she observed, setting down his morning coffee. "The one that usually precedes either a brilliant business strategy or a regrettable impulse purchase." Robert smiled despite his mood. "I'm strategizing, Margaret. These women thought they could come into my home, terrorize my staff, traumatize my son, and simply walk away when caught. I'm disinclined to let that stand." "I suspected as much." Margaret handed him a folder. "This arrived this morning. It seems Ms. Hawthorne and Dr. Calloway are already attempting damage control." Robert opened the folder to find printouts of social media posts and messages sent to prominent society figures. Victoria was claiming she had withdrawn from the arrangement after discovering troubling improprieties in the Mitchell household. Jennifer was suggesting she had left on ethical grounds, concerned about the unhealthy domestic environment for a child. "They're getting ahead of the story," Robert noted, his jaw tightening, "attempting to control the narrative." "Indeed. And Ms. Morgan has apparently been contacting other candidates from your original selection pool, suggesting they form a united front regarding contractual violations. She's building a class for a potential lawsuit," Robert translated, "standard legal intimidation tactics." "Precisely." Margaret hesitated, then added, "There's one more thing, Ms. Roberts has pitched a tell-all series to her social media followers about her harrowing experience in a billionaire's twisted competition. She's careful not to name you directly, but the implications are clear." Robert closed the folder, his decision crystallizing. "They've made their choice then, no quiet resolution. What do you intend to do, sir?" "Something they won't expect." Robert stood, energy suddenly coursing through him. "They believe they're controlling the narrative because they're moving first, but they've forgotten who they're dealing with. Should I contact our legal team?" "Not yet. First, I need to speak with Abigail and Ethan. This affects them too, and I won't make decisions unilaterally anymore." Robert checked his watch. "Is Abigail working today?" "She requested a personal day to check on her aunt. The situation with the candidates has been stressful for her. Of course, please ask her to come see me when she returns. And Margaret, I'll need you to arrange something special. A party." Margaret raised an eyebrow. "A party, sir?" "Yes. A very public, very exclusive event. Something people would be desperate to attend." Robert's eyes gleamed with purpose. "Something worthy of significant media coverage." "I see." Margaret made a note on her tablet. "Any particular theme or occasion?" "Let's call it a celebration of truth. Formal attire, full press access, our usual high-profile guest list. 2 weeks from today." "Consider it done." Margaret paused at the door. "And the guest of honor?" Robert smiled, though there was steel behind it. "That will be a surprise for everyone." After Margaret left, Robert went in search of his son. He found Ethan in the library, surrounded by books about volcanoes, his expression more relaxed than it had been in months. "Hey, buddy," Robert said, sitting beside him. "How are you feeling about our guests leaving?" Ethan looked up from his book. "Happy. They were mean to Abby and fake to me." "You're right about that," Robert acknowledged. "I made a mistake bringing them here, and I'm sorry." Ethan considered this with the direct wisdom of childhood. "It's okay to make mistakes, Dad. Abby says that's how we learn." "Abby is very wise," Robert agreed. "Speaking of learning, I've been thinking about what happens next, and I wanted to talk to you about it. Those women are saying some untrue things about us now that they've left. Ethan frowned. Like what? Like suggesting our home isn't a good place for a child, or that something improper was happening here. That's lying, Ethan said definitively. Mom said lying makes your soul smaller. She did indeed. Robert smiled at the memory. The thing is, Ethan, when people tell lies about you, sometimes you need to stand up and tell the truth. I'm thinking about doing that in a very public way, but it would involve you, so I wanted to ask how you feel about it. Ethan thought for a moment. Would I have to talk to strangers? No, not if you don't want to. You would just need to be present and maybe answer one very important question. What question? Robert took a deep breath. The same question. That was always at the heart of this arrangement, about who you would choose to be part of our family. Ethan's eyes widened with understanding. You mean Abby? You want to ask if I pick Abby? Robert was surprised by his son's immediate grasp of the situation. You've thought about this already, haven't you? Duh, Dad. Ethan rolled his eyes in a gesture so reminiscent of Catherine that it made Robert's heart clench. Abby is the only one who doesn't try to make me different. She likes me just how I am. And how would you feel if Abby became more than just our housekeeper, if she became part of our family? Ethan's face lit up. You mean like you would marry her and she would live here all the time, and she wouldn't have to clean anymore? Something like that, Robert said, amused by his son's straightforward thinking. Though that would be up to Abby, she might not want that. She does, Ethan said with absolute certainty. She looks at you the same way Mum used to when you weren't watching. Robert stared at his son, astonished once again by his perceptiveness. You noticed that? I'm 8, not blind, Ethan replied with surprising sass. And you look at her the same way too. Robert felt warmth creeping up his neck. Well, that's something adults need to talk about together, but for now I'm just asking how you'd feel about the idea. I'd feel awesome, Ethan declared, but Dad, yes? If Abby says yes, you have to let her go back to dinosaur school if she wants. It's her dream. Robert nodded solemnly. That's a very thoughtful condition, Ethan. I agree completely. Later that afternoon, when Abigail returned to the mansion, she was immediately directed to Robert's study. She entered hesitantly, still wearing her coat. You wanted to see me? She asked. I just got back from visiting my aunt. Yes, please. Come in, how is she doing? Abigail's expression clouded. About the same, she has good days and bad days. Today was challenging. I'm sorry to hear that. Please sit down. Robert gestured to the chair across from his desk. I know you're just getting back, but there are some important matters we need to discuss. Abigail sat, looking apprehensive. Is this about the candidates? I heard they've all left. Yes, they're gone, but they're already attempting to spread falsehoods about what happened here. Robert explained the situation briefly, outlining the social media posts and veiled accusations. They're trying to protect their reputations by damaging ours. That's terrible, Abigail said, her brow furrowing. But is it really surprising given their behavior here? Not surprising, no, but I'm not willing to let it stand. Robert leaned forward. I'm planning a response, but it will affect you too, so I wanted to discuss it with you first. Me? How? The candidates have specifically targeted you in their narratives. Victoria is suggesting you manipulated Ethan to gain access to the family fortune. Jennifer is implying you've created an unhealthy dependency. Alexandra is hinting at potential legal issues in your background. Abigail paled. But none of that is true. I know. And I intend to set the record straight, publicly and definitively. Robert hesitated, choosing his next words carefully. But my plan involves something more than just refuting their lies. It involves creating a new truth. I don't understand. Robert took a deep breath. Abigail, these past weeks have revealed something I didn't expect when I started this ill-conceived competition. They've shown me that what Ethan needs, what we both need, was already here. In you. Abigail's eyes widened, her lips parting in surprise. I'm not asking for an answer now, Robert continued quickly. In fact, I'm not formally asking anything yet, but I wanted to know if you would be open to the possibility of... a different relationship with this family, one that isn't defined by employment. Robert, Abigail began, her voice barely above a whisper, are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting? I'm suggesting that I've developed feelings for you, he admitted. Directly. Feelings that go beyond appreciation for your kindness to Ethan, and I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, that you might feel something similar. A blush spread across Abigail's cheeks. Yes, but I never would have presumed. I know. You wouldn't. That's part of why I've come to care for you. Robert smiled gently. Your lack of presumption, your humility despite your obvious intelligence and capabilities. You're extraordinary, Abigail Cooper. She shook her head, clearly overwhelmed. This is unexpected. I understand, and as I said, I'm not asking for a decision now, but my plan to counter the candidates' narratives involves a public event, 2 weeks from now, a formal party where the truth will be revealed. What truth? Abigail asked hesitantly. The truth about their behavior, the truth about what Ethan wants and needs, and if you're willing, the truth about how I feel about you. Abigail sat in stunned silence for a moment. You want to publicly declare feelings for me, your housekeeper. Robert, the society pages would have a field day, your business associates, your social circle. I don't care, Robert said firmly, the opinion of people who would judge someone based on their job title, rather than their character, means nothing to me. What matters is Ethan's happiness and well-being, and I've come to realize my own. But the candidates will be invited to the party, Robert finished, along with press, social media influencers, business leaders, and everyone else who matters in our circles. They'll come expecting the announcement of my choice from the competition. Instead, they'll witness the exposure of the candidate's true behavior and my choice of someone they never considered a contender. Abigail stood abruptly, moving to the window. This is so much to process. Yesterday I was being targeted by these women. Today they're gone, and now you're talking about public declarations. And feelings, and it's overwhelming. Robert remained seated, giving her space. I understand, and I'm not asking for an immediate answer. The party is 2 weeks away. Take time to think, to process. Talk to your aunt if that would help. But know this, whatever you decide, your position here is secure. There will be no repercussions if your answer isn't what I hope it will be. Abigail turned to face him, her expression a complex mixture of emotions. And what about Ethan? How does he feel about this? I spoke with him earlier today. His exact words were that he would feel awesome about you becoming part of our family. Robert smiled. He also stipulated that if you accept, I must support your return to dinosaur school, if that's what you want. A laugh escaped Abigail, breaking some of the tension. He said that? He did. And he's right. Your dream shouldn't be set aside permanently, Abigail. If paleontology is still your passion, we can find a way for you to pursue it. Tears welled in her eyes. You would do that? In a heartbeat. Ethan. And I both want you to be happy. Abigail wiped at her eyes. I need time to think. It's like a fairy tale, and those always made me suspicious. Take all the time you need, Robert assured her. In the meantime, I'll begin preparations for the event. The candidates will receive their invitations 1 week from today, just enough time for them to arrange to attend, but not enough time to create new schemes. After Abigail left, visibly shaken but thoughtful, Robert began making calls, first to his head of security, instructing them to compile all evidence of the candidate's misconduct into a presentable format. Then to his personal attorney, ensuring that the public revelations would not create legal vulnerability. Finally to the family publicist, who would orchestrate the media presence at the upcoming event. We're looking for maximum impact, he instructed the publicist. I want everyone who matters in attendance, and I want comprehensive coverage. This is quite a change from your usual privacy, Mr. Mitchell, the publicist noted. May I ask what's prompted this new approach? Let's just say I've been reminded of something important, Robert replied, that the truth presented boldly is the best defense against malicious lies. The publicist, accustomed to cryptic directions from wealthy clients, simply noted the instructions and promised to deliver the required audience. Over the next few days, Robert observed Abigail with Ethan, giving her space to consider his proposal but watching for any signs of discomfort or withdrawal. To his relief, she maintained her natural, warm relationship with his son, though he occasionally caught her looking at him with new awareness when she thought he wasn't watching. 5 days after their conversation, Abigail sought him out in his study after Ethan had gone to bed. "I've been thinking about your proposition," she began without preamble, "and I have questions." "Of course," Robert gestured for her to sit. "Ask anything." "First, is this real?" Abigail's directness surprised him. "Are these feelings genuine, or are they a reaction to the contrast between me and those women? Am I just the anti-Victoria, the humble alternative to their ambition?" Robert considered her questions seriously. "That's fair. I've asked myself the same thing. What I feel for you began before the competition, small moments of appreciation, noticing how you brightened Ethan's day. The candidates only highlighted qualities in you I already valued, but more importantly what I feel has grown even after they left. It's not a reaction, it's a recognition." Abigail nodded, accepting his answer. "Second question. Have you considered the practical implications? The power imbalance between us? The potential perception that I seduced my employer? The impact on your business relationships?" "I have. The power imbalance is real, which is why I've been careful not to pressure you. As for perceptions, some people will always believe the worst, but my true friends and valued associates will judge based on what they observe between us. The rest don't matter." "Final question," Abigail said, her voice softening. "Are you sure you're ready? It's been less than 2 years since Catherine passed away. Ethan may be ready for someone new in his life, but are you?" Robert felt a tightness in his chest at the mention of his late wife. "Catherine was my first love, and part of me will always love her. But she was also practical and direct, qualities you share. She would want both Ethan and me to be happy, not frozen in time at our worst moment." He met Abigail's gaze steadily. "I'm not trying to replace her. I'm ready to build something new, something different, but equally meaningful." Abigail absorbed his words, her expression thoughtful. "Thank you for your honesty. I haven't made my decision yet, but your answers help." "Take all the time you need," Robert assured her. "The party preparations continue either way. It's important to counter their false narrative regardless of what develops between us." As Abigail rose to leave, she hesitated by the door. "One more thing, Robert. If, and it's still an if, I were to accept, I would want it to be real. No rush to marriage. No fairy tale ending right away. A proper courtship, getting to know each other as equals, not as employer and employee." "I wouldn't want it any other way," Robert agreed readily. "Trust needs time to build, especially given how we started." "Good." Abigail smiled, a genuine expression that lightened her entire face. "Then we understand each other." After she left, Robert found himself smiling too. Whatever her final decision, Abigail's insistence on a genuine relationship rather than a fairy tale solution confirmed what he already knew. She was a woman of substance and integrity, someone who couldn't be bought with wealth or status. The week passed quickly as preparations for the event accelerated. The mansion was being transformed, with the grand ballroom opened for the first time since Catherine's last charity gala. Staff were hired, caterers engaged, security protocols established. Margaret coordinated it all with her usual efficiency, while Robert focused on the strategic elements of the evening. The invitations went out exactly 1 week before the event, cryptically announcing a special celebration and announcement at the Mitchell estate. The society pages immediately began speculating about the nature of the announcement, with most assuming it related to the rumored competition for a new Mrs. Mitchell. Victoria was the first to RSVP, her acceptance arriving within hours of receiving the invitation. Alexandra followed shortly after, then Jennifer. Melanie's acceptance came with a request for special accommodation for her content team, which Robert denied through his assistant. Samantha also accepted, though her response included a personal note. "I hope whatever you're planning brings peace to your family, especially Ethan." 3 days before the event, Robert received confirmation that all major media outlets would be represented, along with key social media influencers and business journalists. The stage was set for a very public revelation. 2 days before the party, Abigail requested a private meeting with Robert. She entered his study with new confidence, her posture straight, her expression determined. "I've made my decision," she said simply. Robert felt his heart rate increase, and a smile broke across Abigail's face, like sunshine after rain. "Yes, to the party, to exploring what's between us, to seeing where this might lead, yes to all of it." Relief and joy flooded through Robert. He stood and moved around his desk, taking her hands in his. "You're sure? Even knowing there will be talk, speculation, maybe even more attempts to discredit you?" "I'm sure," Abigail confirmed. "I've spent my life making safe choices, practical decisions based on necessity rather than hope. For once I want to choose possibility over certainty." She squeezed his hands. "Besides, I have a feeling you're planning something spectacular." "For those women who tried to destroy me." Robert grinned. "Let's just say justice will be served with a side of public humiliation." "I almost feel sorry for them," Abigail said, though her tone suggested otherwise. "Almost." The night before the party, Robert checked on final preparations. The ballroom was resplendent, transformed into an elegant space with subtle autumn-themed decorations, a nod to Catherine's favorite season, a way of honoring the past while embracing the future. The evidence against the candidates had been compiled into a compelling presentation, with security footage, recorded conversations, and documented incidents all ready to be displayed on massive screens. In his bedroom, Robert stood before the mirror adjusting his tie, a nervous energy coursing through him. Tomorrow would change everything: his public image, his family dynamic, the trajectory of his personal life. It was a risk, but one he was increasingly certain was worth taking. A soft knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. He opened it, to find Ethan in his pajamas, clutching a piece of paper. "Shouldn't you be in bed, buddy?" "I made something for tomorrow," Ethan said, holding up the paper. It was a carefully drawn picture of 3 stick figures, a tall one labeled Dad, a medium one labeled Abby, and a small one labeled me. They were all holding hands under a smiling sun. "That's beautiful, Ethan," Robert said, genuinely touched. "Is this for the party?" Ethan nodded seriously. "Abby says sometimes pictures show feelings better than words. I want everyone to see my feelings about our family." Robert knelt to his son's level, his throat tight with emotion. "I think this shows your feelings." "Perfectly. We'll put it somewhere special at the party, okay?" "Okay." Ethan hugged his father impulsively. "I'm glad the mean ladies are coming back." "You are? Why's that?" Ethan's smile turned mischievous. "Because they were wrong about everything, and tomorrow everyone will know it." Robert laughed softly. "Yes, they will, buddy. Yes, they will." He tucked Ethan back into bed. Robert reflected on the journey that had brought them here. A misguided competition born of grief and desperation had somehow led to this moment of clarity and hope. Tomorrow would bring confrontation and revelation, but it would also bring the beginning of something new. A family reconfigured by choice rather than convention, united by genuine affection rather than social expectation. Outside, the autumn, wind rustled through the trees, scattering the last of the season's leaves across the moonlit grounds. Inside the mansion, for the first time in nearly 2 years, the promise of joy had returned to the Mitchell household. The night of the party arrived with perfect autumn weather, crisp, clear, and star-filled. The Mitchell estate was illuminated, from gate to garden, with elegant lighting transforming the mansion into a beacon visible from the winding approach road. Luxury vehicles formed a steady procession through the gates, delivering Greenwich's elite, media personalities, business associates, and social influencers, all buzzing with speculation about the evening's promised announcement. Inside, the grand ballroom glittered with subtle opulence. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over tasteful autumn-themed decorations, arrangements of amber and burgundy leaves, golden candles in hurricane lamps, and delicate branches with fairy lights woven through them. A string quartet played softly. In one corner, while uniformed staff circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres, Robert stood in his private study, making final adjustments to his tuxedo. Margaret entered with a tablet displaying the guest list. "Everyone is arriving according to schedule," she reported. "All 5 candidates are present. Victoria and Alexandra arrived together and are currently networking aggressively in the East Wing. Jennifer is speaking with the medical correspondent from The Times. Melanie is taking discreet photos despite the no social media rule. And Samantha is keeping to herself near the garden entrance." And the media presence? Comprehensive. Society pages, business press, local news, 3 national outlets and several prominent social media channels with live streaming capability. The reach will be exactly as you requested. Robert nodded, satisfied. Perfect. And Ethan? With Mrs. Winters in his room getting ready, he's quite excited about his new suit. And Abigail? Margaret's expression softened slightly. "In the guest suite, sir. The stylists have finished. She's quite transformed." Robert felt a flutter of anticipation. "Everything is proceeding as planned, then. It's time to set things in motion. Please inform security to activate Protocol 3 in exactly 20 minutes. "Of course, sir." Margaret paused at the door. "If I may say so, sir, Catherine would approve of what you're doing tonight." Robert felt a bittersweet pang at the mention of his late wife. "Thank you, Margaret. That means a great deal." After she left, Robert took a moment to center himself, drawing a deep breath. Tonight would change everything, not just for him and Ethan, but for Abigail as well. There would be no going back to the comfortable anonymity of her previous life after this evening's revelations. A soft knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. He opened it to find Ethan, resplendent in a miniature tuxedo, his hair neatly combed, his eyes bright with excitement. "Dad! Mrs. Winters says it's almost time. Do I look okay?" Robert knelt to straighten his son's bow tie. "You look incredibly handsome, buddy, like a true gentleman." "I practiced my part," Ethan said earnestly. "I know exactly what to say when you ask me the question. I'm sure you'll be perfect." Robert placed his hands on Ethan's shoulders. "Are you nervous about all the people?" Ethan considered this seriously. "A little. But Abby says it's okay to be nervous when something's important. It means you care." "Abby's right, as usual." Robert stood, taking his son's hand. "Shall we go check on her?" They walked together through the private family corridor to the guest suite where Abigail was preparing. Robert knocked gently on the door. "Abby, it's us," Ethan called. "Come in," Abigail's voice responded, sounding uncharacteristically hesitant. Robert opened the door, and both he and Ethan froze in astonishment. Abigail stood in the center of the room, transformed from the humble housekeeper they knew into an elegant vision. She wore a deep emerald gown that complemented her chestnut hair, which had been styled in soft waves around her face. The dress was sophisticated, but not flashy, emphasizing her natural grace rather than attempting to create a false impression of glamour. "Wow," Ethan breathed. "You look like a princess, Abby." "Not a princess," she corrected gently. "Just me in a fancy dress." She turned uncertain eyes to Robert. "Is it too much?" "I told the stylists I wanted something simple, but they insisted this was understated elegance, whatever that means." Robert found his voice with effort. "You look absolutely beautiful, Abigail, truly." A blush colored her cheeks. "Thank you, though I feel a bit like I'm wearing a costume." "It's just for tonight," Robert assured her. "Part of the statement we're making." "That Abby's just as pretty as those mean ladies, but nicer?" Ethan asked innocently. Abigail laughed, the sound breaking some of the tension. "I don't think that's exactly the point, Ethan." "No, but it's not wrong either," Robert smiled. "The point is that worth isn't determined by designer clothes or social status, though I must say you wear understated elegance very well." "Are you ready?" Ethan asked, taking Abigail's hand. "Dad's going to show everyone what those ladies did, and then we get to tell everyone our decision." "I'm as ready as I'll ever be," Abigail replied, squeezing his small hand. "Though I still can't quite believe this is happening." "Second thoughts?" Robert asked quietly. Abigail met his gaze directly. "No. Nervousness, yes. Disbelief, definitely. But not doubt. Not anymore." The three of them made their way toward the ballroom, stopping just outside the main entrance. Through the partially open doors, they could see the gathered crowd, hundreds of elegantly dressed guests mingling, champagne glasses in hand, all awaiting the mysterious announcement that had brought them here. Robert spotted Victoria and Alexandra in animated conversation with a group of society matrons, their gestures suggesting they were sharing insider information. Jennifer was holding court with several medical professionals, likely expounding on her wellness expertise. Melanie was posing subtly near an elaborate floral arrangement, while her assistant captured candid photos. Only Samantha stood somewhat apart, watching the proceedings with a thoughtful expression. Margaret approached, tablet in hand. "Everything is in place, sir. Security Protocol 3 is active. Media is positioned. The presentation is cued and ready." "Thank you, Margaret." Robert turned to Abigail and Ethan. "Wait here until I give the signal, then make your entrance through the main doors." "Got it, Dad," Ethan said with a serious nod. "Good luck," Abigail added softly. Robert straightened his shoulders and entered the ballroom alone. A ripple of awareness moved through the crowd as guests noticed his arrival, conversations quieting as attention shifted toward him. He made his way to the slightly raised platform at the far end of the room, where a microphone stood ready. As he took his position, the string quartet faded to silence. All eyes turned expectantly toward him. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen," Robert began, his voice carrying clearly through the sound system. "Thank you for joining us tonight for what I promised would be a special announcement. Many of you have speculated about the nature of this gathering, and I appreciate your patience. As we've maintained a certain mystery." Murmurs rippled through the crowd, anticipation building. "Some of you may have heard rumors about an unusual arrangement at the Mitchell estate over the past month, a competition of sorts to find a new mother figure for my son, Ethan, following the loss of my beloved wife, Catherine." Robert paused, allowing the confirmation of the rumors to sink in. Those rumors were accurate. I did indeed invite 5 accomplished women to spend 30 days in my home, with the understanding that at the end of that period, a choice would be made, primarily by Ethan, regarding who might join our family. All eyes turned to the 5 candidates who responded with varying degrees of composure. Victoria and Alexandra maintained poised smiles, clearly expecting a favorable announcement. Jennifer straightened her posture, adopting a professionally compassionate expression. Melanie struck a subtle pose, aware of the cameras. Samantha simply watched Robert, her expression unreadable. "The candidates were selected based on impressive credentials," Robert continued. "Academic achievements, professional success, social standing, all the qualities one might reasonably seek in a potential partner and parental figure. I believed I was creating an opportunity for meaningful connection." He paused, his expression growing more serious. "What I actually created, however, was an opportunity to observe character under pressure, and what I observed was illuminating." A note of tension entered the room as the 5 candidates exchanged glances. "Before I continue, I want to be clear about something. Tonight is not about humiliation or revenge. It's about truth. It's about ensuring that narratives based on fabrication don't supersede reality. It's about showing my son that integrity matters more than image, and that actions have consequences." Robert nodded to Margaret, who activated the large screens positioned around the ballroom. They flickered to life, displaying a split view of security footage from the Mitchell mansion. The footage showed Victoria deliberately emptying a bathtub onto the carpet, then summoning Abigail to clean it. Another screen showed Melanie intentionally spilling makeup across white bedding while checking her watch. "What you're seeing is systematic sabotage," Robert explained as the footage continued, now showing Alexandra hiding Victoria's pendant in Ethan's dinosaur collection. An organized campaign to isolate my son from the one person who had genuinely connected with him, a young woman who worked as our housekeeper. Gasps and whispers spread through the crowd as the footage continued, now showing the candidates in their midnight meeting, planning to fabricate evidence against Abigail. The audio was crystal clear. "We make it look like she's trying to seduce the boss, use the boy to get to the father." Victoria's face had gone white with fury. Alexandra was already on her phone, presumably texting her attorney. Jennifer maintained a frozen smile while her eyes darted frantically. Melanie looked genuinely shocked, apparently unaware that the mansion had such comprehensive surveillance. The competition ended prematurely. Robert continued as the screens dimmed, "Not because I chose a winner, but because the candidates revealed themselves to be fundamentally unsuited to the role through their own actions. Not through lack of qualifications or pedigree, but through lack of basic kindness, empathy, and integrity." He turned, facing the candidates directly now. "In the days since your departure, several of you have begun spreading false narratives about what occurred in my home. You've suggested improprieties, ethical concerns, and professional misconduct, all while knowing these claims to be untrue. You've attempted to control the story before I could reveal the truth." Victoria stepped forward, her composure cracking. "This is outrageous. You're violating our privacy by showing that footage." "There was no expectation of privacy in the common areas of my home," Robert replied calmly, "as specified in the contracts you all signed. Contracts which, I might add, included morality clauses that you systematically violated through harassment, conspiracy, and false accusations." Alexandra placed a restraining hand on Victoria's arm, whispering urgently in her ear. The lawyer clearly recognized the legal quicksand they were entering. "But tonight isn't just about setting the record straight regarding what transpired during the competition," Robert continued, his tone softening. "It's also about announcing a decision that has emerged from these unexpected circumstances, a decision about the future of the Mitchell family." He turned toward the main doors. "Ethan, would you join me, please?" The doors opened, and Ethan entered confidently, walking through the parted crowd toward his father. His small figure in the miniature tuxedo drew affectionate smiles from the guests. When he reached the platform, Robert knelt to his level. "Ethan, we've talked about what happened during the competition and about what you want for our family going forward. Would you like to share your thoughts with everyone?" Ethan nodded solemnly, then turned to face the crowd. His voice, though young, was clear and composed as he spoke into the microphone Robert held for him. "The ladies who came to our house didn't really care about me," he stated plainly. "They pretended to like what I liked, but they never listened. They were mean to Abby even though she's the nicest person ever. They thought I didn't notice, but I did." A ripple of discomfort moved through the crowd at the child's direct assessment. "My mom taught me that how you treat people who can't do anything for you shows who you really are," Ethan continued, reciting words that were clearly a treasured lesson from Catherine. "Those ladies were nice to my dad but mean to Abby because they thought she wasn't important. That's not who I want in our family." Robert felt a surge of pride at his son's moral clarity. "So, Ethan, if you could choose someone to join our family, who would it be?" Ethan's face broke into a genuine smile. "Abby. She likes me for real, not pretend. She helps me learn stuff and makes me laugh again. And she makes Dad smile like Mom used to make him smile." A murmur of surprise and curiosity swept through the ballroom. "Abigail," Robert called, turning toward the doors. "Would you join us? Please?" The doors opened once more, and Abigail entered. In her emerald gown, with her natural grace and quiet dignity, she drew every eye in the room. She walked slowly toward the platform, her gaze fixed on Robert and Ethan as if drawing strength from them. When she reached them, Ethan immediately took her hand. Robert stepped aside slightly, allowing her to stand beside them on the platform. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Abigail Cooper," Robert introduced her. "For the past 4 months, she has worked in our home as a housekeeper. She is also the person who, without agenda or artifice, managed to reach my son when no one else could. While accomplished candidates competed with expensive gifts and elaborate activities, Abigail connected with Ethan through simple kindness, genuine interest, and patient understanding. He turned to face Abigail directly now. She is also a brilliant woman who had to abandon her studies in paleontology to care for her ailing aunt after losing both parents. A woman who has faced hardship with grace and never lost her capacity for compassion. Abigail's cheeks colored at this public praise, but she held her ground, standing tall beside Robert and Ethan. The original purpose of the competition was to find someone who could bring nurturing and stability back into our home, Robert continued, addressing the crowd again. Someone who could help Ethan heal from the profound loss of his mother. What I failed to realize was that we had already found that person, quietly folding laundry and making paper stars. Victoria could no longer contain herself. "This is absurd," she exclaimed loudly. "You're presenting your maid as a superior choice to accomplished women with actual qualifications? This is nothing but a sentimental fairy tale." Robert turned to her calmly. "Is kindness not a qualification for motherhood, Victoria? Is genuine connection with a child not relevant? Are integrity and compassion less important than social standing or business acumen?" "She clearly manipulated the situation," Jennifer interjected. "Use the child to get to the father. It's textbook." "Is that what you truly believe?" Robert asked. "Or is it what you wish to believe because it justifies your own behavior? Because if Abigail is calculating rather than genuine, then your cruelty toward her becomes strategic rather than unconscionable." The pointed question silenced Jennifer, who retreated a step. "The simple truth," Robert continued, "is that while 5 candidates were busy competing with each other and sabotaging a perceived rival, Abigail was simply being herself, kind to a grieving child, respectful of his feelings, attentive to his needs. She wasn't trying to win anything. She was just being human." He turned back to Abigail, taking her free hand, and in doing so, she reminded me what truly matters in building a family. Not social compatibility or strategic advantage, but shared values, mutual respect, and genuine affection. Robert took a deep breath, his gaze never leaving Abigail's. "Which is why, in front of all these witnesses, I want to ask you officially, Abigail Cooper, would you consider being part of our family? Not as an employee, but as someone who might, in time and at your own pace, become something more?" The ballroom fell completely silent, hundreds of guests holding their breath as they witnessed this unexpected declaration. Abigail's eyes glistened with emotion, but her voice was steady as she replied, "Yes, not because of this grand gesture or the beautiful surroundings, but because of who you and Ethan are when the cameras aren't watching. Because of morning pancakes and volcano experiments and quiet conversations about stars. Yes, I would be honored to explore what we might become together." Ethan, still holding Abigail's other hand, let out a whoop of delight that broke the tension in the room. Laughter rippled through the crowd, followed by spontaneous applause that grew into a standing ovation. The genuine emotion of the moment transcended the societal expectations and class distinctions that had seemed so important just minutes before. As the applause continued, Victoria, Alexandra, and Jennifer made their way discreetly toward the exit, their faces rigid with humiliation. Melanie lingered, seemingly torn between professional opportunity and personal discomfort. Only Samantha approached the platform, a genuine smile on her face. "Congratulations," she said simply. "I'm glad things worked out as they should. Ethan deserves someone who sees him for himself." "Thank you, Samantha," Robert replied, appreciating her graciousness. "Your integrity didn't go unnoticed." As the party transitioned into celebration, with music resuming and champagne flowing, Robert, Abigail, and Ethan found a quiet moment in a corner of the ballroom. "You were incredible," Robert told Abigail. "Poised and eloquent in front of hundreds of strangers. I was terrified," she admitted with a laugh, "but having you both beside me made it easier." She knelt to Ethan's level. "And you, young man, were absolutely perfect. Thank you for wanting me in your family." "Are you going to be my new mom now?" Ethan asked directly. Abigail exchanged glances with Robert before answering carefully. "Not right away, Ethan. Your dad and I need time to get to know each other better as friends who care about each other, but I'll be in your life every day, just not as your housekeeper anymore." But someday, Ethan pressed. Someday, Abigail agreed softly. If that's what we all want when the time comes. I already know I want it, Ethan declared with the certainty of childhood. I've made scientific observations and gathered evidence. Robert laughed. Have you indeed? And what evidence is that? You both get happy eyes when you see each other, Ethan explained seriously, like in the fairy tales when people find their happily ever after. Abigail brushed a gentle hand through his hair. Life isn't quite like fairy tales, Ethan. It's more complicated, with ups and downs and everyday moments that aren't magical at all. I know, Ethan replied. But the best parts are still the same. The people who are meant to be together find each other, even if there are obstacles first. Robert and Abigail exchanged smiles over his head, both touched by his romantic optimism, despite his experiences with loss. There's one more thing we need to do tonight, Robert said, taking both their hands. Something I promised Ethan. Led them through the French doors onto the terrace, where the autumn night was crisp and clear, the stars brilliant above them. A small table had been set up with 3 mugs of hot chocolate and a plate of cinnamon cookies, a recreation of one of their first moments of connection in the kitchen months ago. 2 new beginnings, Robert toasted, raising his mug. And to Catherine, who taught us both about love and would want us to find joy again. To Catherine, Abigail echoed respectfully, and to authentic connections that can't be manufactured or forced. And to dinosaurs and volcanoes and paper stars, Ethan added with a grin. As they sipped their hot chocolate under the starlit sky, the sounds of the party continued behind them, a world of social expectations and judgments that suddenly seemed far less important than this simple moment of genuine connection. Inside, the media was already crafting headlines about the unprecedented event. Billionaire chooses housekeeper over socialites in shocking twist. Modern Cinderella story at Mitchell Estate. Class divisions crumble in Greenwich Mansion. The story would dominate the society pages for weeks, with endless speculation and commentary. But here on the terrace, none of that mattered. What mattered was the warmth in Ethan's eyes as he watched his father and Abigail together. What mattered was the gentle way Abigail wiped a chocolate mustache from Ethan's upper lip. What mattered was the feeling of rightness that had settled over Robert as he watched the 2 people who had brought light back into his world. The path forward wouldn't be without challenges. There would be continued social judgment, adjustments to new roles and relationships, the ongoing care of Abigail's aunt, and the everyday complexities of blending lives. But for the first time since losing Catherine, Robert felt hopeful about the future, not because he had successfully executed a plan, but because he had been open to discovering what was already there, hiding in plain sight. As the evening drew to a close, guests began to depart, each carrying away their own version of the night's events. The media packed up their equipment, having captured a story far more compelling than they had anticipated. The staff began the process of restoring the mansion to its usual state. In the quiet aftermath, Robert, Abigail, and Ethan stood in the now empty ballroom, the only ones remaining. Well, Robert said, loosening his bow tie, that was quite an evening. Do you think they learned their lesson? Ethan asked. The mean ladies? Some people never learn, Abigail replied honestly. But what matters is that we stood up for the truth. And that's a victory, regardless of whether they understand. Yet, what happens tomorrow? Ethan asked, yawning as the excitement of the evening finally began to wane. Robert and Abigail exchanged glances, both realizing they hadn't planned beyond this moment. Tomorrow, Robert said thoughtfully, we begin figuring out our new normal, together. Together, Abigail agreed, her smile holding the promise of all that might be. And as Ethan's small hand reached for hers, and Robert's larger one enveloped them both, the first page of their new story began to write itself. Not a fairy tale, of instant perfection, but a human story of second chances, unexpected joy and love that transcended the boundaries society had tried to impose. 2 years later, the Mitchell estate was transformed once again, though this time with much less fanfare. The autumn garden was decorated simply but beautifully, with wildflowers and rustic touches that reflected Abigail's natural taste rather than formal opulence. Under an arch of branches adorned with paper stars, hundreds of them folded by Ethan, over the past months, Robert and Abigail exchanged vows in an intimate ceremony, attended only by close friends and chosen family. Ethan stood proudly beside them as best man, beaming as he presented the rings. The journey to this day had unfolded gradually, just as Abigail had requested. Their courtship had progressed from friendship to deeper affection, with Robert supporting Abigail's return to university to complete her paleontology degree, while she continued to be a steady presence in Ethan's life. They had navigated the expected social commentary with dignity, neither hiding from public view nor seeking attention. Victoria, Alexandra, Jennifer, and Melanie had eventually faded from prominence in their social circles, their reputations permanently tarnished by the revelations at the party. Only Samantha had maintained contact, eventually designing a specialized research facility for Abigail's paleontology work as a wedding gift. As Robert and Abigail sealed their vows with a kiss, Ethan led the small gathering in enthusiastic applause. At 10 years old, he had blossomed into a confident, compassionate boy who spoke of his birth mother with love and his new mother with equal affection, understanding that his heart had room for both. Later, as the wedding celebration continued, in the garden, Ethan approached his father and new stepmother with a gift box carefully wrapped in dinosaur paper. "I made something for today," he announced proudly. Inside the box lay a delicate mobile of origami creatures, dinosaurs, stars, and tiny volcanoes, all hanging from a circular frame. "It's our story," Ethan explained, "how we became a family." Abigail knelt to hug him, her eyes misting. "It's perfect, Ethan, the best wedding gift possible." "Where should we hang it?" Robert asked, admiring the intricate folds that represented countless hours of patient work. "In the new baby's room," Ethan suggested casually. "So she'll know our story too." Robert and Abigail exchanged startled glances. They had only recently confirmed the pregnancy and hadn't yet told Ethan, planning to wait until after the wedding. "How did you know?" Abigail asked, amazed once again by his perception. Ethan grinned. "You stopped drinking coffee, and Dad keeps looking at you like, 'You're extra special,' and you both whisper and stop talking when I come in the room. I made scientific observations." Robert laughed, pulling his son into a hug. "You're going to be an amazing big brother, you know that?" "I know," Ethan agreed confidently. "I've been practicing with my dinosaurs." As the three of them stood, together in the autumn garden, surrounded by paper stars and the warmth of chosen family, the contrast to the cold competition of 2 years ago couldn't have been more profound. What had begun as an attempt to manufacture connection had evolved into something genuine and deeply rooted. A family bonded not by social convention or contractual arrangement, but by love that had grown naturally in the fertile ground of mutual respect and shared values. In the Mitchell mansion, once emptied by loss and later poisoned by ambition, joy had taken permanent residence. And as Robert watched his wife and son laughing together in the golden afternoon light, he felt Catherine's memory as a gentle blessing rather than an aching absence, a foundation upon which this new happiness had been built, not a shadow cast. Over it, the family they had created was not what anyone had expected, least of all Robert himself, but it was real and true and alive with possibility, proof that sometimes the most precious treasures are found not in elaborate competitions or calculated strategies, but in the quiet moments of genuine connection that change everything. Fim da História. Queridos. Ouvintes, esperamos que a história de Robert, Ethan e Abigail tenha tocado seus corações. Para continuar esta jornada emocional, preparamos uma playlist especial com histórias igualmente cativantes. Encontre-a aqui, clicando à sua esquerda. Se você gostou desta história, não se esqueça de se inscrever em nosso canal e dar like no vídeo. Todos os dias trazemos histórias únicas que exploram a complexidade da vida. Não perca nossos próximos conteúdos. Esperamos por você nos comentários.